Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Thomas Graymont, and I've been a park ranger at Monongahela National Forest for 14 years. In all that time, I've pulled lost hikers out of ravines, treated bear attacks, and talked countless families through their first camping experiences. I've seen hypothermia, broken bones, and panic attacks. I thought I'd seen everything the mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. People always ask me about ghost stories. Every ranger gets asked. Folks want to hear about mysterious lights, strange sounds, maybe a Bigfoot sighting. I used to laugh it off. Ghost stories are just mountain folk trying to scare outsiders, I'd tell them. After 14 years of finding logical explanations for every weird thing that happened in these woods, I figured I had it all figured out. The Appalachian Mountains are old, some of the oldest peaks in the world. They've been here so long that they've worn down to gentle, rolling hills covered in thick forest. But age brings stories, and stories bring fear. The Cherokee used to tell tales about little people who lived in the hollows and could steal your children if you weren't careful. Old mining families passed down warnings about certain valleys where kids shouldn't play. I never paid attention to any of it. I grew up in a coal mining family myself, worked my way up from nothing to get this job. My dad spent his whole life underground, coughing up black dust until it killed him. I wanted something better. Clean air, open sky. The chance to help families make good memories in the wilderness. My wife Sarah used to bring our 3 kids up here for camping trips when they were little. She'd pack sandwiches and hot chocolate, and we'd spend weekends exploring the trails together. Those were the best times of my life. After Sarah died in that car accident 2 years ago, this job became everything to me. Protecting families in the wilderness felt like the most important thing I could do. The Cranberry Wilderness where I work covers 35,000 acres of roadless backcountry. Dense rhododendron thickets create natural mazes that can confuse even experienced hikers. When the fog rolls in, and it rolls in a lot, visibility drops to maybe 20 feet. October nights can hit 35 degrees, cold enough to kill someone who's not prepared. But I knew these mountains. I knew where the dangerous drop-offs were, which trails got washed out in heavy rain, and where the old mine shafts were hidden under decades of fallen leaves. Not permanently. That changed on October 15th, 1972. The call came in just before dawn. A family of 4 had been reported missing from Cranberry Glades campground. 2 parents and twin 8-year-old daughters. The Hendersons from Pittsburgh. They'd checked in 3 days earlier for a week-long camping trip, their first time in real wilderness. When I got to their campsite, everything looked normal at first glance. Tent still standing, camping gear neatly arranged, no signs of a struggle. But something felt wrong. The fire pit was cold, ashes scattered by wind. Food was still sitting out, which should have brought bears, but there were no bear signs anywhere. The weird part was the silence. Normally, you'd hear birds, insects, maybe a squirrel chattering somewhere. But the whole area felt dead quiet, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I started following standard search protocols. Called in the state police, organized volunteer search teams, brought in bloodhounds from the county sheriff's department, set up a base camp, and established communication relay points throughout the search area. That's when I found the footprints. 4 sets of prints led away from the campsite in a straight line toward the deep forest. 2 adult-sized, 2 child-sized. But something about them bothered me. They were too perfect, too evenly spaced. No stumbling, no signs of panic or confusion. Just 4 people walking calmly into the woods like they were following a marked trail. The prints led directly towards Sorrow Hollow. I'd heard that name whispered by local volunteers when they thought I wasn't listening. Old-timers would shake their heads and mumble about places that weren't right. When I asked them to join the search team heading into that area, they suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. Bad place, one old man told me, looking uncomfortable. Been bad since my grandfather's time. Kids go missing there. I ignored him. Kids go missing because parents don't watch them carefully enough, not because of some local superstition. I had a job to do, and a family was counting on me to bring them home safe. I headed into Sorrow Hollow with my radio, compass, GPS unit, and enough gear to spend the night if necessary. The trail started normal enough, just another wilderness path winding between massive oaks and maples showing their fall colors. But about a mile in, things started feeling different. The temperature dropped noticeably, maybe 15 degrees colder than it should have been. My radio began crackling with static, then went completely dead. I checked the battery, fully charged, tried different frequencies, nothing but white noise. My compass needle started spinning lazily in circles instead of pointing north. I tapped it, thinking maybe I was near some iron ore deposits that could mess with the magnetic field. But when I checked my GPS, it showed my elevation as -200 feet. That was impossible. I was clearly walking uphill. The trees around me looked wrong too, stunted and twisted, like something had been slowly poisoning them for years. Some of the branches grew in weird spirals, and the bark on several trees had deep scratches running vertically down their trunks, too regular to be from animals, too deep to be from weather. I kept following the footprints. They were still there, clear as day in the soft earth, leading deeper into the hollow. But now I noticed something else. Small toys scattered along the path. A red ball here, a stuffed animal there, like kids had been dropping them as they walked. The toys looked old. Not just dirty from being outside, but actually old, faded colors, worn fabric, styles that hadn't been popular for decades. That's when I heard the laughter, children's voices, high and bright, echoing from somewhere ahead. My heart jumped. Finally, proof the family was alive. I called out, "Hello, this is Park Ranger Graymont. Are you okay?" The laughter stopped instantly. I waited, listening hard. Nothing but that unnatural silence again. No wind, no birds, no insects. Just the sound of my own breathing and heartbeat. I kept walking, following the prints deeper into the hollow. The fog started rolling in thick, cutting visibility down to maybe 10 feet in any direction. The flashlight beam seemed dimmer than it should have been, even though I'd put in fresh batteries that morning. Then I saw them. 3 children in white dresses, standing between the trees about 20 yards ahead. They looked to be around 8 or 9 years old, with long, dark hair and pale skin. They were holding hands in a line, facing me, perfectly still. "Hey!" I called out, relief flooding through me. "Are you the Henderson girls? Where are your parents?" The children didn't answer. They just stood there, watching me with dark eyes that seemed too large for their faces. Something about their stillness bothered me. They weren't moving at all, not even swaying or shifting their weight like kids normally do. I took a step forward, and they took a step back, still holding hands, still staring. It was perfectly synchronized, like they were one person instead of 3. "It's okay," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and friendly. "I'm here to help. Your parents are worried about you." One of the girls, the one in the middle, raised her free hand and pointed deeper into the hollow. Then all 3 of them turned and walked away, moving in that same synchronized way. Their movements were too smooth, too graceful, like they were floating just above the ground instead of walking. I followed them, but every time I got close, they would disappear into the fog. Then I'd catch glimpses of white dresses between the trees, always leading me deeper, always staying just out of reach. The path started sloping downward more steeply. I found more toys. A wooden horse, a porcelain doll with cracked face, a set of metal jacks. All of them old, all of them arranged in neat little piles like someone had been collecting them. Then I found the prints on the trees. Small handprints, pressed into the bark about 8 feet off the ground. They looked fresh, the bark still damp around the edges. But how could kids reach that high? And why? Would they be pressing their hands against trees hard enough to leave marks? I heard the laughter again, closer this time. It sounded like it was coming from all directions at once, echoing off the trees and rocks. But when I turned toward the sound, there was nothing there but fog and shadows. My watch had stopped working. The hands were frozen at 3:17, though I was sure it had been running when I started into the hollow. I tried winding it, but it wouldn't start again. That's when I realized I was lost. I'd been following what I thought was a clear trail, but now I couldn't see any path at all. The trees all looked the same, twisted and wrong. The fog was getting thicker, and I couldn't tell which direction I'd come from. I tried to retrace my steps, looking for my own footprints, but the ground seemed to have changed. Where there had been clear earth before, now there were tangles of roots and fallen logs. Where there had been fallen logs, now there was bare stone. The children's laughter came again, but this time it sounded different. Older, sadder, like an echo of something that had happened long ago. I called out again, "Where are you? I just want to help." A voice answered from the fog. A little girl's voice, sweet and clear. "Come play with us. We've been waiting so long." Every instinct I had told me to run, but there was a family missing, and those voices belonged to children who needed help. I was a park ranger. I had a job to do. I kept walking deeper into Sorrow Hollow. The fog got so thick I could barely see my own hands. I kept stumbling over roots and rocks that shouldn't have been there, following the sound of children's voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. That's when I heard an adult voice calling my name. "Thomas, Thomas, where are you?" It was Sarah's voice, my dead wife's voice, calling from somewhere in the fog ahead. I stopped walking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Sarah had been dead for 2 years. I'd watched them lower her coffin into the ground, but that was definitely her voice. The same soft accent, the same way she said my name when she was worried about me. "Sarah?" I whispered. "I'm here, Thomas. I've been waiting for you. Come find me." I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was impossible, but my feet started moving anyway, following her voice deeper into the hollow. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this was wrong, that I needed to get out of there, but I couldn't stop myself. Then I heard another voice, my daughter Emma, who'd been killed in the same accident as Sarah. "Daddy? Daddy, we're scared. Why won't you come help us?" Tears started running down my face. I tried to tell myself it was just the fog playing tricks, maybe some kind of acoustic effect bouncing voices around the hollow. But it sounded so real, so much like my family. "Where are you?" I called out. "I can't see you." "Follow the children, Daddy. They know the way." The 3 girls in white dresses appeared again, closer this time. I could see their faces clearly now, and they looked familiar somehow, like I should know them but couldn't quite place where I'd seen them before. They started walking again, and I followed. But now I noticed their feet weren't making any sound on the leaves and branches covering the ground. They moved in complete silence, like they weren't really touching the earth at all. We walked for what felt like hours, though my broken watch couldn't tell me how long it had really been. The hollow kept getting deeper, the walls rising on both sides like we were walking through a canyon. Ancient stone showed through the dirt and roots, not natural rock, but old foundation stones, like from buildings that had been torn down long ago. That's when I started finding the graves. Small mounds of earth with rough wooden crosses, most of them rotted and fallen over. No names on any of them, just dates carved into the wood. 1890, 1891, 1892, dozens of them, scattered through the trees like someone had buried children here and then abandoned the place. The 3 girls stopped at the edge of what looked like an old cemetery. They turned to face me, and for the first time, they smiled. Their smiles were wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth, like someone had cut their mouths larger than they should be. "We've been waiting for you," the middle girl said. Her voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from a long way away. "We need help finding our families." "Where are your families?" I asked. She pointed deeper into the hollow, where I could see the ruins of old buildings through the fog. Stone foundations, collapsed walls, rusted machinery scattered between the trees. "They're working," she said. "They've been working for so long, but they can't stop. We want to play, but there's no one left to play with us." That's when I understood where I was. This was an old mining camp, one of the places where they'd brought whole families to work the coal seams back in the 1892. Kids as young as 8 or 9 would work alongside their parents, sorting coal and running equipment 12 hours a day. And sometimes, the mines collapsed. I'd heard stories about disasters like that, whole families buried alive when the tunnels caved in. The mining companies would just abandon the camps and move on, leaving the dead where they fell. "How long have you been here?" I asked the girls. "Since the mountain fell down," the first girl said. "We were playing when it happened. The grown-ups went to work, but they never came back out." The second girl nodded. We waited and waited, but no one came to get us, so we found other children to play with. Children who come looking for their families, like you're looking for yours. My blood went cold. What happened to the other children? They smiled those horrible wide smiles again. They stayed to play with us. They're still here. Do you want to see them? The fog started clearing, and I could see into the ruins of the mining camp. There were people moving between the broken buildings, adults and children, all dressed in old-fashioned clothes. They moved slowly, mechanically, like they were sleepwalking, and I recognized some of them. The Henderson family was there, the parents and twin daughters I'd been searching for. They were standing in a line with dozens of other people, all facing the same direction, all perfectly still. Their eyes were open but empty, like nobody was home inside their heads. They're safe now, the first girl said. They're with their families forever. No one can hurt them here. I tried to back away, but my feet wouldn't move. The ground under me felt soft and sinking, like I was standing in quicksand. You can stay too, the second girl said. Your wife is here. Your wife, children are here. Don't you want to be with them again? Through the fog, I saw Sarah walking toward me. She looked exactly like she had on the day she died. Same blue dress, same smile, same way of moving that I'd loved so much. Behind her came Emma and my two boys, Michael and David, all of them reaching out to me. We missed you so much, Thomas, Sarah said. We've been waiting for you to come home. Every part of me wanted to run to them, to hold them again, to never let them go. But something was wrong with their eyes. The same empty look I'd seen on the Henderson family. They weren't really my family. They were something else wearing their faces. Come play with us, Daddy, Emma said in that hollow, echoing voice. We have so many games to play. The three girls in white dresses started walking toward me, and I could see that their feet weren't touching the ground at all. They were floating, drifting like smoke, and their white dresses were actually burial. Shrouds, yellowed with age and torn by decades of decay. I finally understood what I was dealing with. These weren't lost children. They were the spirits of kids who died in the mining disaster, trapped here for over 80 years. And they'd been collecting families ever since, keeping them prisoner in the hollow to ease their loneliness. The Henderson family wasn't lost. They were dead, or as good as dead, trapped between this world and whatever came next. And if I didn't get out of there soon, I'd be joining them. I forced myself to look away from Sarah's face and focus on getting out of there. The spirits might look like my family, but they weren't real. My real family was dead and buried, and nothing I did here would bring them back. I pulled out my backup flashlight and started moving toward where I thought the path out should be. But every direction I turned, there were more spirits blocking my way. Children in old-fashioned clothes, adults in mining gear, all of them with those empty, hollow eyes. You can't leave, the middle girl said. No one leaves. This is home now. The ground started shaking under my feet. A deep rumbling sound came from somewhere underground, like machinery starting up after being quiet for decades. The rusted mining equipment scattered around the camp began to move on its own, wheels turning, conveyor belts moving, steam whistling from broken pipes. The work never stops, one of the adult spirits said in a voice like grinding stone. The mountain takes what it needs. I realized the mining disaster wasn't over. It was still happening, over and over again, trapping anyone who wandered into the hollow. The spirits weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to save me, in their own twisted way. They thought death was better than being alone. But I'd spent 14 years learning how to survive in these mountains, and I wasn't giving up now. I remembered something my grandfather had told me when I was little. Cherokee wisdom his grandmother had passed down to him. When the dead won't let go, he'd said, you have to make them remember what they lost. The spirits were stuck because they'd never been properly buried, never been mourned. The mining company had just left them here and tried to forget they'd ever existed. For over 80 years, no one had acknowledged their deaths or honored their sacrifice. I stopped running and turned to face the three girls. What are your names? I asked. They looked confused, like no one had asked them that question in a very long time. Names? The first girl said. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I'm sorry for what happened to you. I'm sorry no one came back for you. I'm sorry you've been alone for so long. The girls stopped moving toward me. The rumbling from underground got quieter. You were just children, I continued. You should have been playing, going to school. growing up. Instead, you died in a mining accident, and no one even remembers your names. Tears started running down the first girl's face. Real tears, not the fake emotions the spirits had been showing me before. Margaret, she whispered. My name was Margaret. I'm Lucy, the second girl said. I'm Beth, said the third. Margaret, Lucy, and Beth, I repeated. I'll remember your names. I'll make sure other people remember them too. But you have to let the Henderson family go. They don't belong here. But we're so lonely, Margaret said. We've been alone for so long. I know, I said. But keeping other people prisoner won't fix that. You need to let go. You need to rest. The spirit that looked like Sarah stepped forward. What about us, Thomas? Don't you want to be with us again? Looking at her hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt. But I knew she wasn't really Sarah. Sarah would never want me to give up. To stop helping people. To join the dead before my time. I love you, I told her. I'll always love you. But you're not really here. You're at peace, wherever you are, and I have work to do. The fake Sarah's face started changing, becoming older, sadder, until it wasn't Sarah at all anymore. It was another mining camp victim, a woman who died in the disaster and been forgotten like all the rest. Help us, she pleaded. Help us be remembered. I will, I promised. I'll make sure people know what happened here. I'll make sure you're honored properly. The rumbling stopped completely. The moving machinery fell silent. One by one, the spirits started fading away, looking peaceful for the first time since I'd arrived. Margaret, Lucy, and Beth were the last to go. Thank you, Margaret said. Thank you for seeing us. They dissolved into mist that sparkled in the dim light, then blew away on a breeze that felt warm and gentle instead of cold and wrong. The fog cleared, and I could see a path leading up and out of the fort. I hollow. At the bottom of the slope, I found the Henderson family lying unconscious but breathing in a small clearing. They were cold and confused when I woke them up, but alive. Where are we? Mrs. Henderson asked. We were just setting up camp. They had no memory of the 3 days they'd been missing. As far as they knew, they'd just taken a short walk into the woods and somehow fallen asleep. I helped them back to their campsite and called for medical evacuation. They were treated for hypothermia and dehydration, but recovered completely. They never asked about the missing time, and I never told them what had really happened. Some stories are too dangerous to tell. The official report listed the Henderson family as having suffered from exposure and disorientation due to sudden weather changes. The medical team found no signs of foul play or unusual circumstances. The family was released from the hospital after 2 days and drove home to Pittsburgh, requesting no media contact. I wrote up the incident as a routine search and rescue, leaving out everything about the spirits and the mining disaster. Who would believe it anyway? And more importantly, what good would it do to scare people away from the mountains I loved? But I couldn't forget what I'd learned in Sorrow Hollow. I started researching the mining camps that had operated in the area during the 1,890 seconds. Found records of a disaster in 1892 that killed 37 people, including 18 children. The Bright Mountain Coal Company had quietly closed the camp and moved operations elsewhere, never bothering to properly bury the victims or notify their families. For over 80 years, those people had been forgotten. No memorial, no marker, no acknowledgement that they'd ever existed. I couldn't let that continue. I contacted the Cherokee Tribal Council and explained what I'd found, leaving out the supernatural parts, focusing on the historical injustice. They were interested in helping create a proper memorial for the mining victims, especially since some of them had likely been Cherokee workers. It took months of paperwork and negotiations, but we finally got permission to create a small memorial garden at the entrance to Sorrow Hollow. Nothing fancy, just a stone marker with the names we'd been able to research, and a plaque acknowledging the mining disaster and its victims. The day we dedicated the memorial, I went back into the hollow one more time. It felt completely different. Peaceful, quiet in a natural way, instead of the unnatural silence from before. Birds were singing, squirrels were chattering, and my compass pointed steadily north. I left flowers on the old graves and spoke the names I'd learned. Margaret Patterson, age 9. Lucy Kowalski, Aja 8. Beth Williams, Aja 10. And all the others whose names I'd found in the mining company records. Rest in peace, I said. You're not forgotten anymore. The hollow stayed peaceful after that. I've been back dozens of times over the years, and it's just another part of the forest now. Families camp there regularly, kids play in the streams, and nobody reports anything unusual. But I learned something important that day, something that changed how I think about my job in these mountains. The Appalachians are old, older than human civilization, older than most of the life on this continent. They've seen countless generations of people live and die, and they remember everything, every injustice, every tragedy, every soul that never found peace. Sometimes the mountains demand acknowledgement, not explanation, not rationalization, just simple recognition that something happened here, that lives were lost here, that people suffered and died and deserved to be remembered. I still don't believe in most ghost stories, but I believe in the power of memory and the importance of honoring the dead. I believe some places hold on to pain until someone cares enough to ease it, and I believe the mountains protect their own, both the living and the dead. These days, when visitors ask me about local folklore, I don't laugh it off anymore. I tell them to respect the old stories, to be careful in places that feel wrong, and to remember that the mountains have long memories, because sometimes the dead just want someone to remember their names. And sometimes that's enough to set them free. My name is William Ironforge, and I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 18 years. In all that time, I never believed in the old mountain stories. Ghost tales, monsters, things that go bump in the night. I always had a logical explanation. Bears make strange sounds. Mountain lions can walk on their hind legs. Scared people see what they want to see. I wish I still believed that. The Cherokee folks around here tell stories about something called the Wampus Cat. Half woman, half panther, they say. A creature that punishes people who break the old hunting laws. My grandmother used to tell me these stories when I was little, back before the park took our family land. She'd point toward Cataract Falls and whisper about the spirits that guard the sacred places. I stopped listening to those stories when I put on my ranger uniform. I had real work to do, protecting wildlife from poachers, keeping hikers safe, enforcing the law. The only monsters I cared about were the ones with guns who came to kill protected animals. Cataract Falls sits at 4,200 feet, deep in the backcountry where most tourists never go. It's a 100-foot waterfall that crashes down into a natural bowl of rocks. The Cherokee used to hold ceremonies there, back in the old days. Now it's just another spot on the map, beautiful and remote. That's where this all started, at those falls. On a cold November morning when the mist hung thick between the trees, I was tracking a group of poachers who'd been hitting the park hard. These weren't your typical locals looking for meat. This was organized crime, professional hunters with military gear and night vision equipment. They were after black bear gall bladders, worth thousands on the illegal market. I'd been chasing them for 3 weeks. Every time I got close, they vanished like smoke. But I'm stubborn. My Cherokee grandfather used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. When someone hurts the animals I'm sworn to protect, I don't stop until I catch them. The first sign something was wrong came from Mary Redwing, a Cherokee tribal police officer who sometimes worked cases with us. She showed up at my station that morning looking worried. "William," she said, "my grandmother says the spirits are angry. Something bad is happening near the falls." I poured myself coffee and tried not to roll my eyes. Mary was a good cop, but she still believed in the old ways. "Mary, the only thing happening near the falls is poachers killing bears. No spirits required." She shook her head. "This is different. The animals are fleeing the area. Birds won't fly over it. Even the insects have gone quiet. Animals can sense when predators are around," I said. "These poachers probably smell like gun oil and fear." But Mary pulled out a small leather pouch and set it on my desk. "Grandmother sent this. She says you'll need protection." Inside was a carved bone amulet on a leather cord. It felt warm in my hand, which was strange. "Mary, I appreciate your grandmother's concern, but your Cherokee blood is stronger than you think," she interrupted. "Your grandmother knew things. Maybe it's time you remembered." I set the amulet down. My grandmother had been dead for 20 years, and I'd spent most of my adult life trying to forget the old stories. I was a modern man with a job to do. "I'm going up to the falls today," I told Mary. Found fresh sign of the poaching camp. Want to come along? She nodded, but her hand went to a similar amulet around her own neck. Yes, someone needs to witness what happens. The way she said it made my skin crawl, but I didn't ask what she meant. We hiked up to Cataract Falls in the early morning. The forest felt wrong from the moment we left the truck. Too quiet, like Mary had said. In 18 years of walking these mountains, I'd never heard such complete silence. No bird calls, no squirrel chatter, no rustling. In the underbrush, even the wind seemed afraid to blow. The poachers' camp was a mess. Not the kind of mess you'd expect from people packing up in a hurry, the kind of mess that comes from pure terror. Expensive equipment lay scattered everywhere. Night vision goggles hung from tree branches 20 feet up. A military-grade radio was smashed against a boulder, its metal case twisted like someone had wrung it out like a wet towel. Steel bear traps, meant to catch 400-pound animals, were bent into pretzels. What the hell happened here? I muttered, kneeling beside a shredded tent. Mary was examining something near the fire pit. William, come look at this. Pressed deep into the muddy ground were tracks unlike anything I'd seen in 18 years. They started as paw prints, big ones, bigger than any mountain lion. But as I followed the trail, they changed. The back paws became longer, more like feet. Human feet. Some kind of deformity, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Look at the claws, Mary whispered. 4 deep gouges scored the earth beside each print. Whatever made these tracks had claws like railroad spikes. The gouges were so deep they'd hit solid rock beneath the soil. We found the first body near the waterfall. The man was wedged into a crevice in the rocks, 30 feet above the pool. There was no way to get a body up there without climbing gear, but his equipment was still down at the camp. More troubling were the claw marks across his chest, 5 parallel tears that went clean through his heavy jacket and into the ribs beneath. How'd he get up there? I called down to Mary. She was standing at the base of the falls, looking up. Maybe he was put there. Put there by what? She didn't answer, but she touched her amulet again. My radio crackled. I tried to call base camp, but got only static. Even my GPS was acting strange, showing our position as somewhere in the middle of the Diver. Tennessee River. Equipment malfunction, I told Mary, but she was walking toward something else. The second body was arranged at the base of a large oak tree. Arranged was the right word, positioned deliberately, arms crossed over chest like he was laid out for burial. But what caught my attention were the scratches in the tree bark above him. Symbols, deliberate scratches that formed patterns. Cherokee writing, if I remembered my grandmother's lessons. What does it say? I asked Mary. She stared at the symbols for a long time. Justice for the sacred hunt. The old laws still bind. Someone's playing games with us, I said, trying to make this look supernatural. But as I spoke, a scream echoed across the mountains. Not human, but not quite animal either. It started as a woman's cry and ended as a panther's shriek. The sound bounced off the rocks around the falls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Every hair on my body stood up. We need to leave, Mary said quietly. Now. But I was already walking toward the sound. 18 years of training told me to investigate, to find the source. Whatever was making that noise, it was my job to handle it. The screaming came again, closer this time. Through the mist near the falls, I saw movement. Something large and dark, walking upright through the trees. I drew my weapon and called out, "Park Service, show yourself." The movement stopped. Then, slowly, a pair of golden eyes turned toward me. They reflected light like an animal's, but there was intelligence in them. Cold, calculating intelligence, and hunger. "William," Mary called. Don't look directly at it. But I couldn't look away. The eyes held me, studying me like I was prey. They were too high off the ground to belong to any normal animal, but too wild to be human. The creature stepped forward, and I caught a glimpse of its shape through the mist. Tall as a man, but moving with a cat's fluid grace. Muscles rippled under dark fur, and those impossible claws caught the light like knives. Then it was gone, melting back into the forest, as if it had never been there. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely holster my gun. "What was that?" I whispered. Mary was already packing up the evidence we'd gathered. "The wampus cat. She's hunting." "That's impossible." Your grandmother would have recognized her immediately. Mary shouldered her pack. We need to warn people. This isn't over. As we hiked back toward the truck, I found myself looking over my shoulder every few steps. The feeling of being watched pressed down on me like a physical weight. Twice I thought I saw those golden eyes watching us from the shadows, but when I turned to look directly, nothing was there. The forest stayed silent all the way back to the road. 3 more hunting teams went missing over the next week. The Park Service brought in additional rangers, but every search party found the same thing: destroyed equipment, impossible tracks, and bodies arranged in ways that defied explanation. The media started calling it the Smoky Mountain Murders. They blamed everything from serial killers to escaped zoo animals. None of them mentioned the Cherokee symbols carved into trees near every crime scene. I tried to focus on the rational explanations. Maybe we had a territorial mountain lion, bigger than usual. Maybe the poachers were killing each other over money. Maybe someone was using trained animals to scare people away from their illegal operations. But the evidence kept pushing me toward an impossible conclusion. The Wampus cat wasn't hiding anymore. She wanted to be seen. I was reviewing case files when Mary burst into my office, her face pale with fear. "There's another team up there," she said. "Heavily armed, military-style operation." "How many?" "At least 12. They've got assault rifles, body armor, even night vision. Drones." She sat down hard in the chair across from my desk. "William, they're not just poachers. This is organized crime. They're planning to clear out every bear in the park." My blood went cold. "During hunting season, prohibition?" Mary nodded. The Cherokee calendar marked this time of year as sacred, when the spirits rested and no hunting was allowed. The fact that modern poachers were violating these ancient laws didn't matter to me legally, but something deep in my chest told me it should. "We need backup," I said, reaching for my radio. "Already tried. Federal agents are 3 hours away." Mary leaned forward. "William, if the Wampus cat finds them first." She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. 12 armed criminals dying in supernatural ways would bring attention we couldn't handle. The park would be flooded with investigators, media, and thrill seekers. "Maybe that's what we need," I said. "Let this thing, whatever it is, solve our poaching problem." Mary stared at me. "You don't understand. The Wampus cat doesn't distinguish between legal and illegal hunters anymore. She's been violated too many times. Anyone with a weapon in her territory is a target." "Her territory?" "The entire park, William. All of it was sacred hunting ground." Before I could respond, my radio crackled to life. "Emergency frequency. Base, this is Ranger Johnson. We've got hikers trapped at Cataract Falls. Something's stalking them. They're describing." Jesus, I don't know how to describe it. I grabbed the radio. "Johnson, this is Iron Forge. What's your location?" "Half-mile from the falls. The hikers made it to the trail shelter, but they won't come out. They say there's a woman walking around outside, but she's got claws, and..." His voice broke up in static. "Johnson, repeat." Only static answered. Mary and I looked at each other. "The hikers are innocent," she said. "They're not hunters, but they're in her territory." We grabbed our emergency gear and headed for the trucks. As we drove up the mountain road, Mary told me more about the Wampus cat legend. "She was human once," Mary said. "A Cherokee woman who tried to spy on the men's hunting ceremonies. For breaking the sacred laws, she was cursed to become half cat, half woman, forever bound to guard the hunting grounds and punish violators." "That's just a story." "Is it?" Mary pointed out the windshield. "Look at the trees. Every tree we passed had deep claw marks scored into the bark. Fresh marks, still weeping sap. They started about 8 feet off the ground and dragged down to shoulder height. No animal in North America could make marks that high." We found Johnson's truck empty, driver's door hanging open. His radio lay smashed on the ground, and his weapon was missing from its holster. The trail to the shelter was marked with those impossible tracks, human and animal, sometimes side by side, sometimes overlapping, as if the creature couldn't decide what it wanted to be. "Johnson!" I called out as we approached the shelter. No answer. The wooden structure sat in a small clearing, designed to protect hikers from weather. Through the windows, I could see people huddled inside a family with 2 young children. But circling the shelter, just at the edge of the tree line, a dark shape paced back and forth. Even in daylight, it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Twice the size of a normal mountain lion, walking sometimes on 4 legs, sometimes on 2. The Wampus cat had found innocent people in her territory, and she didn't care about their intentions. "We have to do something," I whispered to Mary. She was already pulling items from her pack: sage, tobacco, small carved bones. "Give me 5 minutes to prepare a protection ceremony." "We don't have 5 minutes." As if she'd heard me, the creature stopped pacing and turned toward our hiding spot. Those golden eyes found mine across 50 yards of forest, and I felt that same paralyzing fear I'd experienced at the falls. She knew we were there. She knew everything. The Wampus cat opened her mouth and released that terrible scream. Woman and panther combined into a sound that had no place in the natural world. The family in the shelter started crying. Then she began walking toward us. The Wampus cat moved like liquid shadow, flowing between the trees without disturbing a single branch. Up close, I could see the horrible beauty of what she'd become. A woman's torso and face merged seamlessly with a panther's body and limbs. Her human eyes held centuries of rage and grief. "Don't run," Mary whispered beside me. "She's testing us." "Testing us for what?" "To see if we understand." The creature stopped 10 feet away. This close, I could smell her wild musk mixed with something ancient, like the deepest caves in the mountains. When she spoke, her voice was wind through autumn leaves. "William Ironforge." She knew my name. Grandson of Sarah Ironforge, who walked between the worlds. My grandmother's name hit me like a physical blow. "How do you— Your blood remembers what your mind has forgotten." The Wampus cat circled us slowly, never breaking eye contact. "These mountains knew your family before there were parks or rangers, before there were laws written on paper." Mary stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture I'd seen Cherokee elders use. "Honored guardian, these people in the shelter are innocent. They carry no weapons and hunt no animals." The creature's gaze shifted to Mary, and I saw something like approval in those golden eyes. "The daughter of true people speaks with respect, but innocence does not erase the violation." "What violation?" I asked. "The sacred hunting season has been broken too many times. The old agreements are void." She gestured toward the shelter with one massive clawed hand. "All who enter armed territory during the time of spirit's rest must answer for the crimes of others." "That's not justice," I said. "Those people aren't poachers." The Wampus cat's laugh was like wind through a graveyard. "Justice? Where was justice when they flooded our sacred sites to make your park? Where was justice when hunters came with machines to kill our children for money?" She was growing larger as she spoke, or maybe I was shrinking. The rational part of my mind understood that I was experiencing something beyond normal reality. The Cherokee part, the part I'd spent years denying, knew I was standing before a force as old as the mountains themselves. "Your grandmother understood," the creature continued. "She knew the prices that must be paid. She knew some laws cannot be written down or enforced by men with badges." "Then tell me what you want," I said. The Wampus cat smiled, revealing teeth like ivory daggers. "I want you to choose, William Ironforge. You can be a ranger who protects paper laws, or you can be a guardian who protects the true laws. But you cannot be both." Behind us, I heard the rumble of trucks on the mountain road. The poaching team Mary had warned me about 12 armed men heading straight for the most sacred site in Cherokee territory. "They come to violate the hunting prohibition," the Wampus cat said, her voice growing deeper. "They will take bear cubs from their mothers, sell sacred medicines to men who traffic in death." "Let me arrest them," I said. "Let human law handle this." Human law failed. Human law allowed the slaughter to continue. The creature's eyes began to glow brighter. "The old law demands blood for blood, life for life." Mary grabbed my arm. "William, she's offering you a choice no ranger has ever been given. The chance to enforce spiritual law alongside human law. I can't murder people." "Not murder," the Wampus cat corrected. "Justice. The justice your grandmother would have understood." The rumble of engines grew closer. Soon, 12 heavily armed criminals would be in the forest, ready to kill everything they could find. The family in the shelter would be witnesses or victims. I thought about my 18 years as a ranger, All the poachers I'd arrested who were back in the woods within months. All the animals I'd found dead, killed for money, and left to rot. All the sacred sites that were violated because human law wasn't strong enough to protect them. Maybe human law wasn't enough. If I choose your way, I asked, what happens to them? I nodded toward the shelter. Those who respect the mountains have nothing to fear from me, the Wampus cat said. It is only the violators who pay the price. The first truck appeared on the trail, loaded with men in camouflage carrying military weapons. Choose now, grandson of Sarah Ironforge. Be the bridge between worlds that your bloodline was meant to be, or step aside and let spiritual justice take its course. I looked at Mary, who nodded encouragingly. I looked at the terrified family in the shelter. I looked at the armed men who'd come to destroy everything I'd spent my life protecting. And I made my choice. I pulled the Cherokee amulet from my pocket and slipped it over my head. The bone felt warm against my chest, and suddenly I could hear voices, my grandmother's voice, speaking words I'd forgotten I knew. I choose both laws, I said, human and spiritual. I'll be the guardian you need. The Wampus cat nodded once, then turned toward the approaching trucks. As she moved, she began to change, becoming larger, more terrible, more divine. The poachers never had a chance. The official report listed the incident as a territorial dispute between criminal organizations. 12 poachers found dead, apparently killed by rivals using unconventional weapons. The Park Service classified the details to protect ongoing investigations. I kept the real story in a separate file, locked in my personal safe. The family in the shelter remembered nothing except being lost in the woods until rangers found them. Mary's Cherokee blessing had protected their minds from trauma they couldn't have processed. But I remembered everything. The Wampus cat had moved through the poaching team like a force of nature. Not cruel, not vindictive, simply final. Justice without mercy for those who showed no mercy to the land. When it was over, she'd stood before me one last time. You have chosen the harder path, William Ironforge. To serve both worlds requires wisdom your grandfather would be proud of. Will I see you again? When the sacred laws are threatened, I will be there. When the old ways need defending, you will know what to do. She touched my chest where the amulet rested. Your grandmother's blood runs true. Honor it. Then she'd melted back into the forest, becoming shadow and mist and legend once more. That was 6 months ago. Since then, Cataract Falls has become the most peaceful area in the park. No poaching, no illegal hunting, no violation of protected species. Word travels fast among criminal networks. Stay away from the sacred places. I work more closely with the Cherokee tribal police now. Mary and I have developed protocols for protecting culturally sensitive areas that blend traditional knowledge with modern law enforcement. The Park Service doesn't ask too many questions about our methods, as long as they work. And they do work. Wildlife populations are recovering. Sacred sites remain undisturbed. The mountains feel balanced again. I've learned to speak Cherokee from tribal elders who remember my grandmother fondly. I participate in seasonal ceremonies that honor the spirits of place. My children are learning the old stories alongside the new ones. But most importantly, I've learned that some laws are older than governments and stronger than badges. The Wampus cat taught me that justice comes in many forms, and sometimes the most ancient forms are the most necessary. I still wear my ranger uniform. I still enforce federal law and state regulations. But I also wear my grandmother's amulet, and I listen for the voice of the mountains. Because there are guardians who walk between worlds, and some of us wear badges while we do it. The Cherokee say the mountains remember everything, every treaty broken, every sacred site violated, every guardian who stood watch. They remember the price of forgetting ancient laws, and they remember those who choose to honor both worlds. I am William Ironforge, park ranger and spiritual guardian. I protect these mountains with human law and Cherokee wisdom. And somewhere in the mist around Cataract Falls, the Wampus cat watches and waits, knowing that the old agreements are honored once more. The mountains are safe, the balance is restored, and the sacred laws endure. My name is Robert Silvermoon, and I've been a forest ranger for 10 years. I've seen a lot of strange things in these mountains, But I always found an explanation. Bears that looked like monsters in the dark. Weird lights that turned out to be helicopters. Sounds in the night that were just owls or coyotes. I don't believe in ghosts or monsters. I'm a practical man. I served in Korea, worked with radio equipment, saved lives by getting information to the right people fast. When I came back, I wanted to keep helping people, so I became a ranger here in the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. My job is emergency management. When bad weather hits, when people get lost, when disasters happen, I'm the guy who coordinates the response. I've got weather radios, emergency supplies, evacuation plans. I trust in preparation and technology. That's what keeps people safe. The forest where I work is old and dark. These mountains have been here forever, covered in thick trees that block out the sun even in the middle of the day. During World War II, the government stored explosives here. Thousands of concrete bunkers scattered through the woods like gray mushrooms. Most are empty now, but they still give me the creeps. It was November 1966 when everything changed. The leaves had fallen, making the forest look bare and dead. Winter was coming early, and we'd been getting reports of bad storms heading our way. I was checking my equipment, making sure the emergency radios worked, when the first call came in. Ranger Station, this is Tom Jenkins down in Point Pleasant. The voice crackled through the radio. I need to report something. Unusual. I grabbed my notebook. Tom was a good man, owned a gas station near the Silver Bridge. Not the type to make things up. What's the situation, Tom? Well, this is going to sound crazy, but my wife and I saw something flying over the river last night. Wasn't a bird, wasn't a plane. Thing was huge, maybe 7 feet tall, with wings like a bat but bigger. Had these red eyes that glowed like flashlights. I wrote it down, but inside I was already thinking, probably a crane or a heron. People see big birds at dusk, and their imagination fills in the rest. Any other witnesses? Yeah, that's the thing. The Millette family saw it too, over by the TNT area. And the Scarberries, they all described the same thing. Red eyes, huge wings, and... Tom's voice dropped. It didn't make any sound at all, just flew silent as death. After I hung up, I made a note to check the area. Probably just a big bird that had gotten lost during migration. But something about Tom's voice bothered me. He sounded scared, really scared. And Tom Jenkins wasn't afraid of anything. The next morning, I drove out to the TNT area, 8,000 acres of forest dotted with old ammunition bunkers. The military had stored explosives here during the war, and even though it was cleaned up, the place still felt wrong somehow. Too quiet. Even the squirrels seemed to avoid it. I was walking around one of the concrete bunkers when I noticed something odd. The ground was torn up, like something big had landed hard. I knelt down to look closer and found footprints in the soft earth. They weren't like anything I'd ever seen. 3 toes, each about 4 inches long, with what looked like claw marks at the tips. Too big for any bird I knew about, and the spacing was all wrong. Whatever made these prints was walking, not hopping like a bird would. I took pictures and measurements. Maybe a bear? But bears have 5 toes, and these were definitely 3. I'd been tracking animals for 10 years, and these didn't match anything in my field guides. That evening, I called Dr. Margaret Kehoe at West Virginia University. She was a bird expert, and I figured if anyone could identify what kind of creature we were dealing with, it would be her. Robert, I've been getting calls about this all week, she said when I described the footprints. These sightings are spreading. People in Ohio, Kentucky, even Pennsylvania are reporting the same thing. A large winged creature with red eyes. Any idea what it could be? I've been through every field guide we have. There's no bird in North America that matches these descriptions. The size alone is impossible. Nothing that big could fly with the wing structure people are describing. That should have been the end of it. Unknown animal, probably misidentified. File a report, maybe call in a wildlife expert. But that night, sitting in my ranger station, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It started as a low humming sound, like electrical wires in the rain. My radio equipment began acting up, static, crackling, voices fading in and out. Then the temperature dropped 20 degrees in about 10 seconds. I went outside to check the weather equipment, and that's when I saw it. Something was perched on top of the old ammunition bunker about 50 yards away. Even in the darkness, I could see it was huge, bigger than a man, with wings folded against its back, and its eyes glowed red like brake lights on a car. I fumbled for my flashlight, but when I clicked it on, the thing was gone, just vanished. But my radio equipment kept malfunctioning for another hour, and the cold spot didn't warm up until almost midnight. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about those red eyes, how they seemed to look right into me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I'd seen knew I was watching it. The next day, Dr. Kehoe arrived with a carload of scientific equipment. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with brown hair tied back and the kind of serious expression that said she didn't have time for nonsense. She set up cameras, recording devices, and something she called an electromagnetic field detector. If we're dealing with an unknown species, we need proper documentation, she said, adjusting a camera lens. The scientific community won't accept eyewitness accounts alone. I liked her practical approach. It reminded me of military briefings, stick to the facts, gather evidence, make decisions based on data. We spent the morning checking the bunker where I'd seen the creature. Margaret took detailed photos of the footprints and collected samples of what looked like black feathers scattered around the area. But when she examined them under her portable microscope, she frowned. "These aren't feathers," she said. "I'm not sure what they are. The structure is completely wrong. It's like they're made of something that just looks like feathers." While she worked, I interviewed more witnesses. The stories were all remarkably similar. A huge winged creature, red glowing eyes, completely silent flight. But what really bothered me was the pattern of sightings. They weren't random. The creature was following the Ohio River, moving from town to town in a specific direction, toward Point Pleasant and the Silver Bridge. That afternoon, we got our first real break. Margaret's electromagnetic detector started going crazy around 3 p.m., beeping and flashing like something was interfering with it. We followed the signal deeper into the forest, past abandoned bunkers covered with vines. "This is incredible," Margaret said, watching the readings spike. "The electromagnetic field here is off the charts. It's like there's a massive electrical storm, but there's not a cloud in the sky." The air felt thick and heavy, like before a tornado. My skin was tingling, and the hair on my arms was standing up. Then we heard it, a sound like a massive bird call, but deeper, more resonant. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. "There," Margaret pointed up through the trees. Something huge was circling overhead, just visible through the canopy. It was definitely not a bird. Too big, wrong shape, and it was flying in patterns that defied everything I knew about aerodynamics. Sharp turns at impossible speeds, sudden stops in midair, changes of direction that should have torn any living thing apart. Margaret was frantically taking pictures, but when we looked at them later, they showed nothing but blurry shadows. Her electromagnetic detector was going insane, pegging all the way into the red zone. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Nothing biological could generate this kind of electromagnetic field." The creature circled for about 10 minutes, then flew off toward the river. As soon as it left, the electromagnetic readings dropped to normal, and the oppressive feeling in the air lifted. That night, we set up a watch rotation. Margaret wanted to observe the creature's behavior patterns, and I wanted to get a better look at what we were dealing with. We positioned ourselves near the bunker where I'd first seen it, with night vision equipment and cameras. Around midnight, Margaret's equipment started acting up again. The electromagnetic detector began its frantic beeping, and the temperature dropped like someone had opened a freezer door. "It's coming," Margaret said, her voice tight with excitement and fear. This time, we got a good look at it. The creature landed on the bunker roof with impossible grace for something so large. It was definitely 7 feet tall, maybe more, with wings that stretched at least 10 feet from tip to tip. The wings looked like a bat's, but the body was more humanoid. Most unsettling were the eyes, 2 red orbs that cast actual light, not just reflected it. And it was looking directly at us. "It knows we're here," I whispered. As if responding to my words, the creature tilted its head and made a sound. Not the bird call we'd heard earlier, but something like a voice. Deep, resonant, almost like words, but in no language I recognized. Margaret was recording everything, but her hands were shaking. "Robert, look at my instruments. The electromagnetic field isn't just strong, it's organized, patterned, like it's trying to communicate. The creature spread its wings and took off, flying in a circle around our position. Each time it passed overhead, Margaret's equipment registered the same pattern of electromagnetic pulses. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. That's Morse code, I said, my military training kicking in. SOS. The creature was sending a distress signal. It made 3 more circles, each time repeating the same pattern, then flew off toward Point Pleasant. Margaret and I packed up our equipment in stunned silence. "This changes everything," she said as we walked back to our vehicles. "If that thing is trying to communicate, if it's intelligent, we're not dealing with just an unknown animal. We're dealing with something that understands our technology, our communication methods. But what's it trying to warn us about?" That notion kept me awake the rest of the night. In my experience, distress signals meant one thing: I have you. Someone was in danger. But who? And from what? The next morning brought our answer. Tom Jenkins called the ranger station, his voice shaky with fear. "Robert, you need to get down here to the bridge. Something's happening. People are having dreams, all the same dream. They see the silver bridge falling into the river, cars and people falling with it. And the strangest thing, they all say there was a giant bird thing in the dream, trying to warn them to stay away." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November weather. The creature wasn't just sending a distress signal. It was trying to warn us about a disaster, and the silver bridge was the target. Margaret and I rushed to Point Pleasant, where we found the town buzzing with nervous energy. People were gathering in small groups, talking in hushed voices about their dreams. What scared me most was how specific they were. "I saw the bridge just crumple like paper," said Mrs. Henderson, who ran the local diner. "Cars were driving across when it happened. I could hear people screaming, and that red-eyed thing was flying overhead, like it was trying to tell everyone to get away." "Same dream here," added Bill Morrison, a local mechanic. "Bridge went down around rush hour, dozens of cars in the water. But the weird part was, I felt like the bird thing was trying to help, not hurt anyone." I walked out onto the silver bridge with Margaret, trying to see what might be wrong. The bridge was built in 1928, a suspension bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio. It carried thousands of cars every day, and it looked solid enough to me. But I wasn't an engineer. "We need to get this bridge inspected," I told Margaret. "If that creature is trying to warn us about structural failure, you think it can predict the future? I think it knows something we don't." That afternoon, I called the State Department of Transportation and requested an emergency inspection of the Silver Bridge. The bureaucrat on the other end wasn't interested. "We inspect that bridge regularly, Ranger Silvermoon. It's perfectly safe. We can't shut down a major traffic artery because of some bird." This isn't just about a bird. We have dozens of witnesses reporting the same prophetic dream. "Prophetic dreams? Sir, are you feeling all right?" I hung up, frustrated. How do you explain that a 7-foot-tall creature with glowing red eyes is sending Morse code warnings about bridge collapse? It sounded crazy even to me. That evening, the creature appeared again, but this time it was different. More aggressive, more urgent. Margaret and I were monitoring the TNT area when every piece of electronic equipment we had started screaming. Not just beeping, actual alarm sounds. The electromagnetic readings spiked higher than we'd ever seen. The creature came out of the darkness like a missile, flying straight at us. At the last second, it pulled up, passing so close I could feel the wind from its wings. It circled us 3 times, each pass lower than the last, and with each pass, my radio crackled with what sounded like voices. "Bridge failing. Structure compromised. Get them away from the water." The voices were faint, distorted, but definitely human. It was like the creature was somehow picking up and transmitting radio signals from somewhere else. Somewhere in the future. "Margaret, are you recording this?" "Every word." "But Robert, this is impossible. Those voices, they're not coming from any radio station I can identify. It's like they're coming from a disaster that hasn't happened yet." The creature landed on a nearby bunker and fixed us with those terrible red eyes. This time, the communication was direct. Not Morse code, not electromagnetic patterns. Images flooded my mind. I could see the Silver Bridge as clearly as if I was standing on it. But in these visions, the bridge was wrong. I could see stress fractures in the steel, metal fatigue that wasn't visible from the outside. I saw how the weight of rush hour traffic would be just enough to trigger a catastrophic failure. I saw the exact time, 5:04 p.m. on December 15th, just 3 weeks away. And I saw the people who would die. Dozens of them, cars full of families heading home for dinner, men and women who worked hard all day and just wanted to get home to their loved ones. Kids in the back seats of cars, never knowing what hit them. The visions stopped as suddenly as they'd started, leaving me gasping and shaking. The creature took off, disappearing into the night sky. "What did you see?" Margaret asked, her face pale in the moonlight. I told her everything, the structural damage, the specific time, the number of casualties. As I talked, I realized how insane it all sounded. But the visions had been so real, so detailed. I could still see the stress fractures in my mind, could still hear the sound of steel cables snapping. "We have to do something," I said. "Even if it sounds crazy, even if no one believes us, we can't let those people die." Over the next few days, the creature's appearances became more frequent and more intense. It was showing up all over the Ohio Valley, being seen by dozens of people every night. The electromagnetic disturbances were getting stronger too, causing power outages and radio interference throughout the region. But with each sighting, the messages became clearer. The creature wasn't just warning about the bridge collapse, it was providing specific information about how to prevent it. Through a combination of telepathic images and electromagnetic signals, it showed us exactly which structural elements needed immediate attention. I tried again to get an official bridge inspection, this time with Margaret's scientific credentials backing me up. We submitted detailed reports, electromagnetic readings, even recordings of the future radio transmissions. The response was always the same: insufficient evidence. Too many variables, budget constraints. Meanwhile, the dreams were spreading. People as far away as Charleston were reporting the same vision of bridge collapse. Local newspapers started calling it mass hysteria, but I knew better. The creature was expanding its warning, trying to reach as many people as possible. A week before the predicted disaster date, something changed. The creature appeared in broad daylight, landing right on the Silver Bridge during the afternoon rush hour. Hundreds of people saw it, and the sight of those glowing red eyes stopped traffic in both directions. For 10 minutes, the creature perched on the center tower of the bridge, its wings spread wide, calling out in that strange, resonant voice. Every car radio on the bridge started picking up the same transmission, static filled with Trends Fiver Mender. Whispered warnings to stay away from the water and don't cross on the 15th. The story hit the regional news that night. Giant bird creature stops traffic on Silver Bridge. Most people laughed it off as a hoax or mass hallucination, but I noticed something important. Traffic across the bridge dropped significantly. Some people were taking the warnings seriously. 3 days before December 15th, I made a decision that would probably end my career. I called a press conference and told the media everything. The creature, the warnings, the specific structural problems with the bridge. I showed them Margaret's electromagnetic readings, played the recorded transmissions, laid out all our evidence. Most reporters treated it like a joke. Local ranger claims giant bird predicts bridge collapse, but a few took it seriously enough to do their own investigating. And when structural engineers started looking at the bridge with fresh eyes, focusing on the specific areas the private later creature had highlighted, they found something that chilled them to the bone. The creature had been right. The Silver Bridge was on the verge of catastrophic failure. The engineers confirmed it on December 12th, 1T, 3 days before the creature's predicted disaster date. Stress fractures in the suspension cables, metal fatigue in the support structures, exactly where the visions had shown me. The bridge was a disaster waiting to happen, but getting it closed was another matter. The Silver Bridge was a vital link between West Virginia and Ohio. Thousands of people depended on it for their daily commute. The economic impact of closing it, even temporarily, would be enormous. "We need more time to study the problem," the state transportation official told me over the phone. "We can't just shut down a major bridge based on the predictions of a, what did you call it? A Mothman? We don't have more time." December 15th, 5:04 p.m. That's when it happens. Mr. Silvermoon, with all due respect, even if your bird creature is real, it can't predict the future with that kind of precision. I hung up and turned to Margaret, who had been monitoring her equipment all week. The electromagnetic readings were going crazy, spiking higher each day as we approached the 15th. "It's trying to communicate something new," she said, studying the patterns on her screen. "The signals are different now. More urgent, but also hopeful, like it thinks we might actually be able to prevent this." That night, December 14th, the creature appeared one final time. But this appearance was unlike all the others. Instead of the distant, mysterious entity we'd been observing, it came down and landed just 20 feet away from where Margaret and I were standing. Up close, it was even more terrifying and magnificent than I'd imagined. 7 feet tall, wings that spanned 12 feet, covered in what looked like dark feathers but felt wrong somehow when the wind blew them. Its eyes weren't just red lights. They were intelligent, ancient, filled with a sadness that seemed to go back centuries. And when it looked at me, I understood. The creature showed me everything: its true nature, its purpose, its connection to disasters throughout history. It wasn't a monster or an alien. It was something far stranger, a guardian spirit, tied to the electromagnetic fields of the earth, able to sense disruptions in the fabric of time and space that preceded major catastrophes. It had appeared before the Johnstown flood in 1889, trying to warn people to evacuate the valley. It had been seen before the Titanic sank, circling the ship's route for days. During the Korean War, it had tried to warn about the Chinese offensive that caught my unit by surprise, the communication breakdown that had haunted me for years. The creature couldn't prevent disasters, but it could see them coming, and it spent its existence trying to warn people, usually being dismissed as a monster or hallucination. But this time was different. This time, someone was listening. The creature spread its wings and took off, flying directly toward the Silver Bridge. Margaret and I followed in our vehicles, racing through the December night toward Point Pleasant. We arrived at the bridge approach just as rush hour was beginning on December 15th. It was 4:30 p.m., and the bridge was packed with cars, people heading home from work, families doing Christmas shopping, kids going to evening activities. The creature was already there, perched on the bridge's center tower, calling out its warning cry. But this time, something was different. This time, people were starting to listen. Cars were slowing down, drivers looking up at the massive winged figure above them. Some were turning around, deciding to take the long way home. Others were pulling over, calling friends and family on their cell phones to warn them away from the bridge. At 4:55 p.m., the electromagnetic readings on Margaret's equipment went completely off the scale. The creature's eyes blazed brighter than we'd ever seen them, and its calls became almost frantic. "It's happening," I said, watching the stress patterns the creature had shown me becoming visible in the bridge's steel structure. "We need to get these people off the bridge now." I grabbed my emergency radio and started broadcasting on every frequency I could reach. "This is Ranger Robert Silvermoon with an emergency announcement. The Silver Bridge is experiencing structural failure. All traffic needs to evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." At the same time, Margaret was calling every emergency service in the region, using her university credentials to demand immediate bridge closure. The creature was flying in circles above the bridge, its electromagnetic field triggering car alarms and radio disruptions that forced people to pay attention. At 5:03 p.m., 1 minute before the predicted failure time, the last car cleared the bridge. At 5:04 p.m. exactly, the Silver Bridge collapsed. We watched from the riverbank as the entire center span fell into the Ohio River with a sound like thunder. Steel cables snapped like rubber bands, concrete crumbled, and the massive structure that had stood for nearly 40 years disappeared into the dark water below. But this time, no one died. The bridge was empty. Every single person who would have been on that bridge at 5:04 p.m. was somewhere else, warned away by a creature that most people still thought was a monster. The creature landed on the riverbank beside us and looked out at the wreckage of the bridge. In its red eyes, I saw satisfaction, relief, and something that might have been gratitude. Then it spread its wings one final time and flew away into the December sky. I never saw it again. The official investigation into the Silver Bridge collapse found exactly what the creature had shown me: hive metal fatigue and stress fractures that had been building for years. The bridge failure was inevitable. It was just a matter of when, not if. But what made headlines wasn't the structural analysis. It was the fact that despite collapsing during rush hour on one of the busiest travel days of the year, not a single person was killed. The miracle of Point Pleasant, the newspapers called it. Of course, they didn't mention the creature in their reports. The official story was that a routine inspection had revealed dangerous structural problems, leading to the last-minute evacuation. My role as the ranger who coordinated the emergency response was acknowledged, but the real hero was never mentioned. Margaret and I tried to tell the real story, but who would believe us? A 7-foot-tall creature with glowing red eyes that could predict the future? It sounded like something from a bad science fiction movie. So we kept our evidence to ourselves. Margaret's electromagnetic recordings, my detailed, logs of the creature's appearances, the photographs and audio recordings. All of it went into a classified file that only a few government officials ever saw. But privately, everything changed. The incident led to a complete overhaul of how emergency management agencies handle unusual intelligence sources. There are now protocols for investigating and acting on information that comes from non-traditional sources, though they're careful not to use words like supernatural or prophetic. Margaret became the director of a new research program at the university, officially studying electromagnetic anomalies in disaster prediction, but really investigating reports of creature sightings throughout Appalachia. She's documented dozens of cases where similar entities have appeared before major accidents, natural disasters, and structural failures. As for me, I was promoted to head of regional emergency management, with a special focus on innovative early warning systems. My job now is to monitor reports of unusual phenomena throughout West Virginia and coordinate responses when something doesn't fit normal patterns. Because the creature wasn't unique, there are others like it, scattered throughout the mountain regions, watching and warning. Most people still think they're monsters or hoaxes, but we know better. We've learned to listen. The Mothman, as the media dubbed it, has been spotted dozens of times since the bridge collapse. Always before disasters, always trying to warn people. A mining accident in Pennsylvania, a chemical plant explosion in Ohio, a dam failure in Kentucky. The creature appears, tries to communicate, and usually gets dismissed as folklore or imagination. But now there are people like Margaret and me, people who understand what these sightings really mean. We've built a network of emergency responders who know how to recognize the signs and act on impossible information. It's not easy, explaining to your superiors that you want to evacuate a building because a giant winged creature was seen perching on the roof. But when you can show them the patterns, the electromagnetic anomalies, the correlation between sightings and subsequent disasters, some of them start to listen. We saved a lot of lives on December 15th, 1966. But more importantly, we learned that some warnings come from sources we don't understand, and wisdom sometimes wears a frightening face. The mountains of West Virginia are full of old spirits and ancient protectors. The Mothman is just one of them, doing what it can to keep people safe in a world that's forgotten how to listen to the voices that speak from beyond our normal understanding. I still work these mountains, still coordinate emergency responses, still prepare for disasters. But now I know that preparation isn't just about weather radios and evacuation plans. Sometimes it's about paying attention to the impossible and having the courage to act on warnings that come from creatures with glowing red eyes. Because in the end, it doesn't matter where the warning comes from. What matters is that when something tries to save lives, we listen. The Mothman is still out there, still watching, still warning. And people like Margaret and me are still listening, still ready to act when ancient guardians try to protect us from disasters we can't yet see coming. Some things are bigger than our understanding. Some protectors wear frightening faces. And sometimes, the thing that looks like a monster is actually trying to save your life. I learned that lesson in the forests of West Virginia, from a creature with wings like night and eyes like fire. And I'll never forget it. My name is Franklin Stonebridge, and I've been a park ranger in Daniel Boone National Forest for 15 years. I've pulled more lost hikers out of caves than I can count, mapped underground rivers that snake through Kentucky limestone for miles, and rappelled down cliff faces that would make most people sick just looking at them. I grew up in these mountains, son of a coal miner who taught me that every hole in the ground has a story to tell. What I'm about to tell you happened in the summer of 1976, during the worst heat wave Kentucky had seen in decades. The forest was thick with humidity that stuck to your skin like wet wool, and even the caves, usually cool refuges from the summer heat, felt warm and stuffy. I'd been working cave rescue for so long that I thought I knew every dark corner and hidden passage in the Red River Gorge. I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Catherine Deepwater, a scientist from the University of Kentucky, had been studying the underground river systems with her research team. They were supposed to check in every 12 hours. They'd missed 3 check-ins. We found their equipment, Sheriff Morrison told me over coffee that morning. His hands shook slightly as he lit another cigarette. Found it in Devil's Den Cave, about 2 miles into the main passage. Torn up real bad, Frank, like something big got hold of it. I'd been in Devil's Den countless times. It was one of the more challenging cave systems. Lots of underwater passages and tight squeezes, but nothing I hadn't handled before. The Cherokee used to call it the place where stone spirits sleep, but I'd always figured that was just old stories meant to keep people away from dangerous caves. What kind of damage are we talking about? I asked. Morrison stubbed out his cigarette. Diving gear ripped clean in half. Underwater lights crushed like someone stepped on them. And Frank. He paused, meeting my eyes. There were marks on the cave walls. Deep gouges in solid limestone, like something with claws the size of railroad spikes had been scraping at the rock. I finished my coffee and grabbed my gear. In 15 years of cave rescue, I'd seen people get lost, hurt, even killed by rockfalls and drowning. But I'd never seen equipment destroyed by an animal. Bears didn't go that deep into caves, and certainly not into the water-filled passages where Dr. Deepwater's team had been working. The drive to Devil's Den took 45 minutes through winding mountain roads. The closer we got, the quieter the forest became. Usually, you'd hear birds, insects, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. But as we parked near the cave entrance, I noticed the silence. Even the ever-present Kentucky cicadas had gone quiet. "You feel that?" Morrison asked as we unloaded equipment from my truck. I did feel it. The air pressure seemed wrong, like the minutes before a bad thunderstorm. But the sky was clear, just that oppressive blue-white heat that had been baking the mountains all summer. The entrance to Devil's Den yawned before us like a giant mouth. Cool air drifted out, carrying the smell of wet limestone and something else, something organic and unpleasant that I couldn't quite identify. I'd smelled plenty of things in caves over the years. Bat guano, decaying animals, stagnant water. This was different, stronger, almost like meat that had been left out too long. "Let's go get them," I said, checking my headlamp and rope. But as I stepped toward that dark opening, something deep in my gut told me we weren't just going to find 3 missing scientists. We were walking into something that had been waiting in the dark for a very long time. The first 1,000 feet into Devil's Den followed the familiar route I'd taken dozens of times before. Morrison stayed close behind me, his breathing echoing off the limestone walls. We passed the usual landmarks. The formation, locals called the Preacher's Pulpit, the narrow squeeze known as Fat Man's Misery, and the underground pool where the cave opened into its first large chamber. That's where we found the first signs that something was seriously wrong. Dr. Deepwater's team had set up a base camp in this chamber, and it looked like a tornado had hit it. Sleeping bags were shredded, their synthetic fillings scattered across the cave floor like snow. A portable table lay on its side, one metal leg bent at an impossible angle. Food containers had been crushed flat, their contents spilled and spoiled. "Jesus," Morrison whispered, playing his flashlight over the destruction. What could do this? I knelt beside the remains of a diving tank. The thick steel had been punctured by something sharp, leaving holes the size of my thumb. Whatever had done this was strong enough to punch through metal that could withstand hundreds of pounds of water pressure. "Look at this," I called Morrison over to. The cave wall. In the beam of my headlamp, deep parallel grooves scarred the limestone, 4 of them, evenly spaced, each about an inch wide and 6 inches long. They looked like claw marks, but from an animal that would have to be at least 9 feet tall to reach that high on the wall. "Bear?" Morrison suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Bears don't have claws this big," I said, running my finger along one of the gouges. The limestone was hard as concrete, Yet these marks went deep into the rock, and they sure don't dive underwater. We followed the trail of destruction deeper into the cave. The passage narrowed and widened, leading us past formations that had taken thousands of years to grow. Some of them had been broken recently, their white calcite cores exposed like broken bones. The trail led to the water. Devil's Den's main feature was an underground river that disappeared into flooded passages too narrow for most people to follow. Dr. Deepwater and her team had been using advanced diving equipment to map these underwater tunnels, tracking where the river went as it carved its way through the mountain. At the edge of the dark water, we found more equipment. A diving mask floated face down, its faceplate spider-webbed with cracks. An underwater camera lay on the rocky shore, its waterproof case split open like an egg. "Frank," Morrison's voice was tight with fear. "Look at the water." I followed his flashlight beam to the surface of the underground pool. The water was moving wrong. Instead of the gentle current you'd expect from an underground river, it seemed to swirl and eddy as if something large was moving beneath the surface. As we watched, a stream of bubbles rose from the depths, followed by another, then another. Someone, UIC, was breathing down there. "Dr. Deepwater?" I called out, my voice echoing off the cave walls. "Can you hear me?" The bubbles stopped. For a moment, the only sound was our own breathing and the gentle lap of water against stone. Then, from somewhere deep underwater, came a sound I'll never forget as long as I live. It started low, almost below the range of human hearing, then rose to become a keening wail that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound echoed through the water, through the rock, through my bones. Morrison grabbed my arm. "We need to get out of here, now." But I was transfixed by what I saw next. The water began to glow with a faint, sickly green light. Not like the beam of a flashlight, but like the phosphorescence you sometimes see in ocean water. The glow pulsed gently, as if something large was breathing underwater, its body giving off that eerie light with each breath. The wailing sound came again, closer this time. Whatever was making it was moving toward us through the flooded passages. "Frank," Morrison shouted, pulling harder on my arm, "we have to go!" I snapped out of my trance and followed him back. Through the cave passage, our flashlight beams dancing wildly across the walls as we scrambled over loose rocks and squeezed through narrow openings. Behind us, I could hear splashing, as if something very large had surfaced in the underground pool. We didn't stop running until we reached the cave entrance. Outside, the afternoon sun seemed impossibly bright after the absolute darkness of Devil's Den. Morrison was shaking as he lit another cigarette, his third since morning. "What the hell was that thing?" he gasped. I didn't have an answer. In 15 years of cave rescue, I'd seen a lot of strange things underground. Echo chambers that played tricks with sound, unusual mineral formations that glowed in certain light, underground streams that changed direction without warning. But I'd never seen water glow on its own, and I'd never heard any animal make a sound like that keening wail that seemed to come from something with lungs the size of oil drums. "We need to call for backup," I said, though I wasn't sure what kind of backup would help against something that could punch holes in steel and make limestone glow. "And we need to find out what happened to Dr. Deepwater and her team. Because one thing was certain, they weren't just lost in a cave. They were somewhere down there with something that shouldn't exist, something that had been waiting in the dark waters of Devil's Den for God knows how long. And now it knew we were coming. By the time backup arrived, word had spread through the local community like wildfire. 2 state police officers, a cave rescue team from Lexington, and Dr. Deepwater's research supervisor from the university all converged on Devil's Den as the sun was setting. Dr. James Mitchell, the research supervisor, was a thin, nervous man who kept adjusting his glasses and checking his watch. "Catherine is one of our best underwater researchers," he explained as we gathered around my truck. "She's explored cave systems in Mexico, Florida, even underwater caves in the Bahamas. If anyone could handle whatever's down there, it's her." "What exactly was her team studying?" I asked. "Underground river flow patterns," Mitchell replied. "There's something unusual about the water system in this area. The rivers seem to connect in ways that don't match the geological surveys. Catherine thought there might be unmapped passages, maybe even underground chambers large enough to house significant water bodies." Tom Bradley, the lead cave rescue specialist from Lexington, spread out a map of the known cave system on the hood of my truck. "We've got about 3 miles of mapped passages," he said, pointing to various sections. "But these underwater areas here and here have never been fully explored. Too dangerous for regular diving equipment." "That's where Catherine was working," Mitchell added. "She had special deep-water gear, equipment designed for cave diving in extreme conditions." As we fold a friend, planned our search strategy, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The forest around Devil's Den was completely silent. No bird calls, no insect sounds, not even the rustle of wind through the trees. It was as if every living thing had fled the area. "We go in pairs," Bradley announced. "A standard cave rescue protocol. Rope teams, continuous communication. Nobody goes more than 500 feet from base camp without checking in." We entered the cave at dusk, 6 men with enough equipment to outfit a small expedition. The familiar route felt different now, charged with intention that made every shadow seem threatening. When we reached the underground pool, Bradley set up a portable camp with lights and communication equipment. "Water temperature is 54 degrees, reported Jack Chen, our team's diving specialist, as he tested the pool. "That's about normal for this depth. But the mineral content is way off the charts. There's something in this water that shouldn't be here." "What kind of something?" I asked. Chen frowned at his testing equipment. "High levels of phosphorus, for one thing. That could explain the glow you saw. But there's also organic material. A lot of it. Like something's been living in this water for a long time." That's when we heard the voices. They came from deep in the flooded passages, muffled by water and distance, but clearly human. Dr. Deepwater's voice, calling for help, her team members responding. They sounded frightened but alive. "They're trapped in an air pocket somewhere," Bradley decided. "Probably in one of the unmapped chambers. Chen, you're our best diver. Think you can follow the sound?" Chen was already suiting up in his diving gear. "I'll trace the underwater passage, see if I can find where those voices are coming from. Give me 30 minutes. He slipped into the dark water and disappeared beneath the surface, his underwater lights creating a fading glow as he swam deeper, into the cave system. We watched his air bubbles trail across the surface, marking his progress through the submerged tunnels. 20 minutes later, his head broke the surface near the edge of the pool. But something was wrong. Chen's face was white with terror, and he was swimming faster than I'd ever seen anyone move through water. "Get me out!" he shouted. "Get me out now!" Bradley and I pulled him onto the rocky shore. Chen's diving gear was damaged, deep scratches across his air tank, his diving mask cracked down the middle. "What happened down there?" Bradley demanded. "It's not alone," Chen gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "Whatever's down there, it's not alone. I found the chamber where the voices are coming from. Dr. Deepwater and her team are trapped in an air pocket about half a mile into the system. But there's something else in the water with them. Something big." "How big?" I asked. Chen's hands shook as he removed his damaged diving equipment. "I saw it when I was swimming back. It followed me. 9, maybe 10 feet long, swimming faster than any fish I've ever seen. But it wasn't a fish. It was shaped like a person. But wrong. Arms too long, legs that moved like a dolphin's tail. And its eyes." He shuddered. Its eyes glowed in the dark like a cat's, but green. Bright green. Before anyone could respond, the water in the pool began to churn. Something large was moving beneath the surface, creating waves that lapped against the shore where we stood. The sickly green glow I'd seen earlier began to pulse through the water, growing brighter with each pulse. "Everyone back from the water," Bradley ordered, but it was too late. The thing surfaced 20 feet from shore. I got my first clear look at the creature that had been haunting Devil's Den, and my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. It was humanoid but wrong in every possible way. Tall as a basketball player but built like a swimmer, with arms that hung almost to its knees and legs that seemed to merge together below the water. Its skin was pale and smooth, like something that had never seen sunlight. But the worst part was its face. It looked almost human, except for the eyes. Huge, luminous green eyes that seemed to take up half its face, and the mouth filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. When it opened that mouth, the keening wail I'd heard earlier echoed through the cave chamber, so loud that it seemed to shake dust from the ceiling. The creature raised one impossibly long arm out of the water, and I could see the claws that had torn through Dr. Deepwater's equipment and gouged those marks in the limestone walls. Each finger ended in a claw as long as a kitchen knife, curved and sharp as razors. "Everybody out," Bradley whispered. "Move slow, no sudden movements." But as we began to back away from the water, the creature's glowing eyes focused on me with an intelligence that made my blood freeze. This wasn't just an animal defending its territory. This thing was studying us, learning about us, deciding what to do with us. And from its expression, I didn't think it was planning to let us leave. The creature didn't attack immediately. Instead, it floated in the center of the underground pool, watching us with those terrible glowing eyes. Its breathing created small waves that lapped against the shore with an almost hypnotic rhythm. "Nobody move," Bradley whispered, but his voice carried in the cave chamber, and the creature's head snapped toward him at the sound. That's when Dr. Deepwater's voice called out from somewhere deep in the flooded passages. "Franklin, is that you? Don't come into the water. It's protecting something." The creature turned at the sound of her voice, and I realized it understood human speech. Not just the words, but their meaning. When it looked back at us, there was a calculating intelligence in those green eyes that was more frightening than any animal rage. "Dr. Deepwater," I called out, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Are you hurt? How many are with you?" "All three of us are alive," her voice echoed from the depths. "We're trapped in an air chamber about half a mile back. The water level rose and we can't swim back through the flooded passage. But Franklin, you need to know something about this creature. It's not just an animal. It's been here for centuries, maybe thousands of years." The Cherokee knew about it. The creature made a sound, not the keening wail from before, but something that almost sounded like speech. Deep, rumbling syllables that seemed to have meaning, though I couldn't understand what it was trying to say. "It's trying to communicate, Doctor," Deepwater called out. "The cave paintings we found back here. They show this creature, or others like it. The Cherokee called them water guardians. They protect the underground river systems from contamination." "Contamination?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. "Our equipment." Dr. Deepwater's voice was heavy with guilt. "Our chemicals for testing the water, our lights, our presence itself. We've been poisoning its home without realizing it. It's not trying to hurt us. It's trying to protect the caves." The creature submerged briefly, then surfaced closer to shore. Up close, I could see details that made my scientific mind reel. Its skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent in places, showing the circulation of greenish blood beneath. Gills along its neck opened and closed rhythmically, allowing it to breathe both air and water. Its body was perfectly adapted for life in underwater caves, evolved over countless generations to become the ultimate guardian of this environment. But it was also dying. I could see the signs now that I knew what to look for. The glow from its skin was weaker than it should be, pulsing irregularly. Its movements were slower, more labored. The contamination from modern human activity, AG, not just our equipment, but decades of pollution seeping into the groundwater, was killing it. "It's sick," I said, more to myself than to the others. The creature's eyes met mine, and in that moment, I felt a connection I can't fully explain. Images flashed through my mind, not my own memories, but the creature's. I saw the caves as they once were, crystal clear water flowing through pristine limestone passages. I saw other creatures like this one, a whole community of them living in the underground river systems throughout Kentucky, and I saw how they had died off one by one as pollution and human activity poisoned their world. This was the last of its kind. "Frank," Bradley said urgently, "the water level's rising." He was right. The underground pool was getting deeper, spilling over onto the rocky shore where we stood. Somewhere in the cave system, the creature was controlling the flow of water, using its intimate knowledge of the underground rivers to flood the passages. "It's trying to wash us out," Chen realized, "force us to leave the caves." But I understood something else. The creature wasn't just trying to make us leave. It was dying, and it wanted to take its home with it. If it couldn't protect the caves from contamination, it would flood them, sealing the underground river system forever. "No," I said, stepping toward the water. "There has to be another way." The creature's head emerged from the rising water just a few feet from where I stood. This close, I could see the intelligence in its eyes, but also the pain. Centuries of protecting this place, and now it was too weak to continue, too poisoned by the modern world to survive. "Let me help," I said, speaking directly to the creature. "We can clean the water. We can protect this place without destroying it." The creature tilted its head, studying me. Then, slowly, it extended one clawed hand toward me. Not to attack, but offering something is a choice. I could feel what it wanted. It was offering to show me the full extent of the underground river system, all the hidden chambers and secret passages that no human had ever seen. In exchange, I would become the new guardian. I would dedicate my life to protecting these caves, just as it had for so many centuries. The water was up to my waist now, and I could feel the current pulling at my legs. Behind me, Bradley and the others were retreating toward higher ground, but soon the entire chamber would be flooded. I reached out and took the creature's hand. The moment our skin touched, the world exploded into visions. I saw the entire cave system as the creature knew it, hundreds of miles of passages, underground lakes the size of football fields, crystal formations that took millions of years to grow. I felt the heartbeat of the mountain itself, the slow pulse of water through limestone that had been flowing since before humans walked the earth, and I understood what I had to do. "Dr. Deepwater," I called out, my voice carrying through the flooded passages. "Can you and your team make it to the surface if I lower the water level?" "Yes," came her reply. "But Franklin, what are you planning?" I looked into the creature's glowing eyes one last time. "I'm going to take your place," I said. "I'm going to protect this place the way it should be protected." The creature squeezed my hand gently, and I felt a warmth spread through my body. Not painful, but transforming. The water around us began to recede, draining back into the deeper passages. But I was changing, becoming something that could survive in both worlds, human enough to work with people, but connected to the caves in a way no ordinary person could be. When the water reached normal levels again, the creature released my hand and sank beneath the surface. I never saw it again, but I could feel its presence in the deeper parts of the cave system, resting at last. We brought Dr. Deepwater and her team to the surface as dawn was breaking over Daniel Boone National Forest. They were weak from their ordeal, but unharmed, full of stories about ancient cave paintings and underground chambers that defied every known geological survey of the area. But they also agreed to keep certain details to themselves. The official report listed the incident as a cave rescue complicated by unusual flooding and equipment failure. Dr. Deepwater's research was reclassified as an environmental protection study, focusing on the need to preserve Kentucky's underground water systems from contamination. The Cherokee Nation was consulted as part of a new cultural sensitivity initiative, recognizing their traditional knowledge of the cave systems. No mention was made of the creature, though Dr. Deepwater's team had photographed the cave paintings showing the water guardians. Those images became part of a restricted academic archive, available only to researchers with special clearance. As for me, I was promoted to Director of Environmental Protection for the Daniel Boone National Forest. My new job involves monitoring water quality in the cave systems, restricting access to sensitive areas, and developing protocols for sustainable cave research. It's work that requires me to spend a lot of time underground, checking on places that most people will never see. That's fine with me. I've found my calling in these dark passages, ensuring that the ancient underground rivers stay clean and protected. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the deepest caves, I catch a glimpse of that green glow in the water, or hear sounds that might be communication from something that officially doesn't exist. The creature's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Devil's Den and the surrounding cave systems are now protected areas, off limits to all but essential scientific research. The water quality has improved dramatically over the past few months, and I've detected signs that other underground life forms, species that science hasn't classified yet, are beginning to return to passages that had been barren for decades. Dr. Deepwater now heads a new university program, studying the intersection of environmental science and traditional folklore. Her work has led to similar protection efforts in cave systems throughout Appalachian Kentucky, always in consultation with local Cherokee authorities who remember the old stories about what lives in the dark waters beneath the mountains. Sometimes visitors to the forest ask me about the legends they've heard. stories of creatures in the caves, strange lights in underground rivers, sounds that echo through limestone passages on quiet nights. I tell them what any good park ranger would. Stick to marked trails, respect the environment, and remember that some places are older and more mysterious than we might imagine. But late at night, when I'm alone in my grank, the cabin near Devil's Den, I sometimes hear that keening wail echoing faintly through the forest. It's not mournful anymore, though. It sounds almost like a song, the voice of something ancient and patient, reminding me that there are guardians in the darkness, protectors of places that mankind is only beginning to understand. The mountains have their secrets, and some of those secrets are worth protecting, even if it means accepting that we share this world with intelligence far older and stranger than anything in our textbooks. I sleep well, knowing that the underground rivers flow clean and pure, watched over by eyes that glow green in the eternal darkness. And if that makes me something other than entirely human anymore, well, that's a small price to pay for keeping the ancient agreements between mankind and the spirits that guard the sacred waters beneath Kentucky's mountains. The Cherokee were right all along. Some places are protected by guardians older than human, memory. And sometimes, if you're very quiet and listen carefully on a still night near Devil's Den, you can still hear them singing in the dark. My name is Eugene Starweather, and I've been a forest ranger for 8 years now. Before that, I flew fighters in the war. I thought I'd seen everything the sky could throw at me: enemy planes, flak bursts, weather that could kill you in seconds. But I was wrong, dead wrong. People around Flatwoods know me as the guy who explains away the strange lights. When farmers call about flying saucers, I'm the one who tells them it was probably a weather balloon, or maybe one of those new experimental jets from Wright-Patterson. I've got a good eye for aircraft. Had to, or I'd be dead. It was September 12th, 1952, when everything I thought I knew went straight to hell. I was finishing my evening patrol near the Fisher farm when the first call came in. My radio crackled to life around sunset. "Eugene, you there?" It was Martha at the dispatch station. She sounded shaken. "I'm here, Martha. What's got you spooked?" "Well, we got about 6 calls in the last hour, folks saying they saw some kind of fireball crash into the woods near the Fisher place. Real bright, they said. Made a sound like thunder." I sighed. Probably another meteor. We'd been getting a lot of those reports lately. "I'll check it out. Probably just space junk burning up." "That's what I figured, but..." Martha paused. "Eugene, there's something else." The Fisher boys went up to look for it. They came running back about 20 minutes ago, scared out of their minds. They're saying they saw some kind of spaceship and something tall, something with glowing red eyes. I almost laughed. The Fisher boys were good kids, but they had active imaginations. Still, if something had crashed in my forest, I needed to check it out. Could be a downed plane. I'll head over there now. Tell the boys I'll want to talk to them. The drive to the Fisher farm took about 15 minutes on the winding mountain roads. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting everything orange and red. We should have been peaceful. Instead, something felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. No bird songs, no rustling in the brush. Even my truck seemed to make too much noise. I'd learned to trust my instincts in the war. Right now, they were screaming at me to turn around. The Fisher farmhouse sat in a small valley surrounded by thick woods. I could see lights on in the kitchen windows. When I knocked, Mrs. Fisher answered the door with flour on her hands and worry in her eyes. "Oh, Eugene, thank goodness you're here. The boys are still shaking. They won't hardly talk about what they saw up there." She led me into the kitchen where 3 boys sat around the table. Eddie Fisher, age 14, and his friends Neil Nunley and Jean Lemon, both about the same age. They looked up at me with wide eyes. "Boys," I said, sitting down across from them, "tell me what you saw." Eddie swallowed hard. "We saw it come down, Mr. Starweather. Real bright, like a shooting star, but bigger. It didn't burn up like meteors do. It went down behind that hill there, near the old oak tree." "So you went to look for it?" "Yes, sir," Neil said. "We thought maybe it was an airplane. We wanted to help if someone was hurt." "That was brave of you. What did you find?" The boys looked at each other. Jean Lemon, the oldest, spoke up. "It wasn't no airplane, Mr. Starweather. It was..." I don't know how to describe it. Round, kind of, but pointed at the top. About as big as a house. And it was glowing. Glowing how? Like it was hot inside. And there was this smell. Like sulfur, but worse. Made us want to throw up. Eddie nodded quickly. And then we saw it. The thing. What thing? It was tall. Real tall. Maybe 10 feet. It had this hood or helmet or something, and underneath, its eyes were glowing. Bright red. And when it looked at us, I felt like my brain was on fire. The boy's story was crazy, but they weren't lying. I could see that much. They were genuinely terrified. Their hands were still shaking. Did this thing do anything? Say anything? It made this sound, Neil whispered, like metal scraping against metal. And it floated, didn't touch the ground, just hung there in the air, looking at us. Then, what happened? We ran, Eddie said, fast as we could, didn't stop till we got home. I questioned them for another 20 minutes, but their story stayed the same. They'd seen something crash, investigated, and found something that scared them half to death. As a ranger, I had to check it out. As a pilot, I knew aircraft. Whatever they'd seen, I'd figure out what it really was. Boys, I want you to stay put tonight. Don't go back up there. I'll handle this. Mrs. Fisher walked me to the door. Eugene, those boys have never lied to me, not about important things. If they say they saw something strange, I believe they saw something, Mrs. Fisher. I'm just going to find out what it was. I got back in my truck and headed for the woods. The sun had set completely now, and my headlights carved a pale tunnel through the darkness. I had my flashlight, my radio, and my service pistol. Whatever was up there, I'd deal with it. But as I drove up the logging road toward the crash site, I couldn't shake the feeling that my 8 years of explaining away strange sights was about to come to an end. The logging road ended about half a mile from where the boys said they'd seen the crash. I parked my truck and grabbed my gear. The night was clear and cold, with a full moon giving me decent visibility. But the silence was still wrong. No crickets, no owls, no small animals moving through the brush. I'd investigated plenty of crash sites during the war. You develop a routine, look for debris patterns, check for survivors, secure any sensitive materials. I followed the same procedure now, moving methodically through the trees. About 10 minutes in, I found the first piece of evidence. A tree, maybe 60 feet tall, with its top broken clean off. The break was fresh sap still oozing from the wood. But here's what bothered me. The tree was bent at an impossible angle, like something had pushed it over from above, then let it snap back. I took out my notepad and sketched the damage. Then I noticed the smell the boys had mentioned. It was faint at first, but as I got closer to the hilltop, it got stronger. Sulfur, yes, but mixed with something else. Something metallic and sharp that made my nose burn. My radio crackled. Eugene, you copy? I keyed the mic. I'm here, Martha. How's it looking up there? Found some tree damage. Looks like something came down pretty hard. Still investigating. Copy that. We got another call about strange lights over near Braxton County. You want me to send someone else? Negative. I'll handle this first. I clicked off and kept climbing. The smell was getting worse, and my flashlight beams seemed dimmer somehow, like the air itself was thick. That's when I saw the marks. They were burned into the ground in a perfect circle, maybe 20 feet across. The grass inside the circle was completely gone, leaving bare earth that looked almost melted. I knelt down and touched the soil. It was still warm. I'd seen bomb craters, artillery impacts, even places where planes had gone down hard and burned. This wasn't like any of them. The heat pattern was too even, too precise. And there was something else. The dirt seemed to shimmer slightly, like it had tiny pieces of metal mixed in. I took out my camera and started documenting everything. That's when my radio started acting up. Instead of Martha's voice, I got static, and what sounded like voices speaking in a language I'd never heard. The sounds were rhythmic, almost musical, but they made my teeth ache. I switched the radio off and kept working. Professional, methodical, just like in the war. But when I stood up and swept my flashlight around the clearing, I wasn't alone anymore. It stood at the edge of the trees, maybe 50 feet away. The Fisher boys had gotten the height right. It was tall, at least 10 feet, but that's where their description fell short. It wasn't just tall, it was wrong in ways that hurt to look at. The thing wore something like a robe or cloak that seemed to absorb light. Where its face should have been, there was a hood or helmet with two glowing red points underneath. But here's what the boys couldn't have seen in their terror. The thing wasn't solid. Not completely. I could see the trees behind it through its body, like looking through dirty water. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then it made the sound Neil had described, metal scraping against metal, but with an undertone like wind through a cave. I reached for my pistol, slowly. I'd faced down enemy fighters, survived being shot down over France, lived through situations that should have killed me. But looking at this thing, I felt something I hadn't experienced since I was a kid afraid of the dark. Pure animal terror. The creature tilted its head, like it was studying me. The red glow from its eyes got brighter, and suddenly my head was full of images that weren't mine. I saw the Earth from space, looking small and blue and fragile. I saw other worlds, other stars, places where the sky was purple and the ground was made of glass. I saw machines beyond anything we'd ever built. Cities that floated in space, creatures that looked like the thing in front of me. And through it all, I heard a voice that wasn't a voice, speaking directly into my mind. Asterisk, you are not ready. Your species is not ready. But soon. Asterisk. Then it was gone. Not fading away, not running off into the trees, just gone, like someone had turned off a light. I stood there in the clearing for a long time, my heart hammering, trying to convince myself it had been some kind of hallucination. Maybe the smell was some kind of gas leak, making me see things. Maybe I'd hit my head when I was climbing. But the burned circle was still there. The melted soil was still warm. And my radio was working again. Eugene, you there? I've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. I keyed the mic with a hand that was definitely shaking. I'm here, Martha. Everything all right? You sound strange. I looked around the clearing one more time. The thing was gone, but I could still feel it watching me from somewhere. Yeah, I lied. Everything's fine. Looks like a meteor impact. Nothing to worry about. You want me to call the university? They might want to take a look. No, I said quickly. It's not that big. I'll file a report in the morning. I packed up my gear and headed back to the truck, fighting the urge to run. Every shadow looked like it might be hiding something. Every sound made me jump. By the time I got back to the ranger station, I'd almost convinced myself it was just my imagination. Almost, but when I developed the film from my camera, half the pictures came out completely black, and the other half showed things that shouldn't have been there, lights in the sky, shapes moving through the trees, and in one shot, clearly visible at the edge of the frame, a tall figure with glowing red eyes. I locked the photos in my desk drawer and went home. But I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those alien landscapes and heard that voice, asterisk, you are not ready, asterisk. The question was, ready for what? The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. I needed to figure out what I'd really seen up there, and I needed help. The kind of help that had security clearances. I made a call to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. During the war, I'd served with a guy named James Crawford who'd gone into some kind of scientific work for the military. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it would be him. Eugene Starweather, James said when the call went through. Haven't heard from you in years. How's the ranger life? Complicated, I said. James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to take it seriously. Have you heard anything about unusual aircraft? Maybe experimental stuff that doesn't look like anything we're building? There was a long pause. Where are you calling from? My office. Why? Eugene, I'm going to give you a number. Call it in exactly 1 hour. Ask for Dr. Spacecraft. That's not a real name, but use it anyway. Tell him I sent you, and tell him about whatever you saw. Can you do that? Dr. Spacecraft? Trust me, 1 hour. The line went dead. An hour later, I called the number. A voice answered on the first ring. Dr. Spacecraft. I told him everything. The crash, the Fisher boys, the creature, the burned circle, the photographs. He listened without interrupting. Mr. Starweather, I'm going to be there this afternoon. Don't talk to anyone else about this. Don't file any reports. And whatever you do, don't go back to that site alone. Are you going to tell me what's going on? When I get there. He hung up. Dr. Spacecraft, his real name was Dr. James Morrison, arrived at 4 o'clock in a black sedan with government plates. He was about my age, thin and pale, wearing a suit that looked expensive. He carried a metal briefcase that he kept locked to his wrist. "Show me the site," he said. No small talk, no explanations. We drove up to the Fisher farm. The boys were at school, which was probably for the best. Mrs. Fisher offered us coffee, but Morrison just asked for directions to the crash site. "You seem to know more about this than you're telling me," I said as we hiked up the logging road. "Mr. Starweather, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. The government has been aware of visitors. For several years now, we've had encounters in New Mexico, California, and now here. What you saw last night was not the first of its kind. Visitors? Extraterrestrial reconnaissance. We believe they're studying us, trying to determine if we're ready for contact." Ready for what? That's what we're trying to figure out. We reached the clearing where I'd seen the creature. In daylight, it looked different. The burned circle was still there, but it seemed smaller somehow. The soil had cooled, but it still had that strange metallic shimmer. Morrison opened his briefcase and pulled out several instruments I didn't recognize. He took readings, collected soil samples, and photographed everything with a camera that looked nothing like mine. "Radiation levels are elevated," he said, checking one of his devices. "Electromagnetic disturbance is off the charts. This is definitely what we've been looking for." "What exactly have you been looking for?" He looked at me seriously. "Proof that we're not alone." That's when we heard the sound metal scraping against metal, echoing through the trees. Morrison's instruments started going crazy, needles jumping, alarms beeping. "It's back," he whispered. The creature emerged from the tree line exactly where it had the night before. In daylight, it looked even more impossible. The robe or cloak it wore seemed to bend light around it, making it hard to focus on. But the red glow from its eyes was unmistakable. Morrison stepped forward, holding up one of his instruments. "We come in peace," he said loudly. "We want to communicate." The creature's head turned toward him, and I felt that familiar pressure in my skull. But this time, instead of alien landscapes, I saw something else. Morrison's instrument readings, as if I was looking through the creature's eyes. It was studying our technology the same way we were studying it. Then the creature did something new. It raised one arm, or what I assumed was an arm, and pointed at Morrison's briefcase. The lock clicked open by itself. "How did it?" Morrison started to say, but the creature was already moving. Not walking exactly. More like flowing across the ground without touching it. I drew my pistol, but Morrison grabbed my arm. "Don't, it's trying to communicate." The creature stopped about 10 feet away. Up close, I could see that what I'd taken for a robe was actually some kind of technology, metallic fibers that seemed to move on their own, shifting and rippling. The hood wasn't a hood at all, but some kind of helmet or breathing apparatus. And the eyes? They weren't eyes. They were sensors or displays, glowing with information I couldn't understand. The creature reached into Morrison's briefcase and pulled out a small device that looked like a radio. It held the device for a moment, and then set it on the ground between us. The radio crackled to life, but instead of static, we heard a voice. Clear, human-sounding, but speaking with an odd rhythm. "We observe your species. You show curiosity. This is good. But you also show violence. This is concerning." Morrison and I looked at each other. "You're learning our language?" Morrison asked. "We learn, quickly. Your people create much sound. Radio waves, television. We listen, we understand. Why are you here?" I asked. The red glow seemed to pulse. "Your world approaches a choice. Technology advances, but wisdom does not. We have seen other worlds make this choice. Most choose poorly." "What kind of choice?" "Peace or destruction. Your weapons grow powerful. Soon, you will have star weapons, nuclear fire. You must learn responsibility before this time comes." Morrison's face had gone pale. "How long have you been watching us?" "Since your first atomic fire," We watch all species when they reach this point. Some learn, some do not. What happens to the ones that don't learn? The creature was quiet for a long moment. Then it said, "They are no longer." A chill ran down my spine. You destroy them, they destroy themselves. We only observe. But sometimes we try to help. We show individuals like you the choice that comes, hope that wisdom will spread. What do you want us to do? Morrison asked. Prepare your people. Teach peace. The choice comes too soon, perhaps in your lifetime. The creature picked up the radio and handed it back to Morrison. We will return. Continue to observe. If your species chooses wisely, we will help you reach the stars. If not, it gestured around the clearing, this world will be silent. And then it was gone again, just like that. Morrison and I stood in the clearing for a long time, not talking. Finally, he packed up his instruments and we headed back to the truck. That was real, wasn't it? I said. Real as anything I've ever seen. Morrison locked his briefcase again. The question is, what do we do about it? You said the government knows about these things. What's the official position? Morrison was quiet until we reached the truck. Officially, they don't exist. We can't let the public know. Can you imagine the panic, the chaos? So we do nothing? We prepare. Quietly, we set up monitoring stations, train people to make contact, and hope that when the time comes, we'll be ready. As we drove back toward town, I thought about what the creature had said. A choice was coming, peace or destruction. And somehow, it was up to people like Morrison and me to help our species choose correctly. The problem was, I wasn't sure we were wise enough to make the right choice. 3 days later, everything went to hell. I was finishing my morning patrol when Martha's voice came over the radio, high and tight with panic. Eugene, you need to get to the Fisher farm, right now. Something's happened to the boys. My blood went cold. What kind of something? They're unconscious. All 3 of them. Found them this morning, lying in that clearing where you were investigating. Mrs. Fisher is hysterical. I pushed my truck as hard as I dared on the mountain roads. When I got to the farm, there were already 2 cars in the driveway, Dr. Morrison's black sedan and a county ambulance. I found Morrison in the kitchen with Mrs. Fisher, who was crying quietly while a paramedic checked her blood pressure. How bad? I asked Morrison. They're alive, but... He shook his head. You need to see this. He led me outside to where the ambulance was parked. Through the open back doors, I could see the 3 boys lying on stretchers. They looked like they were sleeping, but when I got closer, I saw their eyes were open. Wide open, staring at nothing. How long have they been like this? I asked the paramedic. Mrs. Fisher found them around 7 this morning. Best we can tell, they've been unconscious for at least 6 hours. But here's the strange part. All their vital signs are normal. Heart rate, breathing, blood pressure. Everything's fine. They just won't wake up. Morrison pulled me aside. There's more. Their body temperature is 3 degrees below normal. And look at this. He showed me a small device that looked like a Geiger counter. It was clicking steadily. Radiation exposure. Low level, but consistent with what we found at the site. They went back up there? Apparently. Mrs. Fisher says Eddie was talking all week about going back to look for more evidence. She told them to stay away, but teenage boys don't listen. I looked at the unconscious kids. Can we wake them up? We've tried everything. Doctors at the county hospital are baffled. But, Eugene, there's something else you need to know. This isn't an isolated incident. He handed me a manila folder marked classified in red letters. Inside were reports from all over the country, children and adults found unconscious near UFO sighting locations. Some woke up after a few hours. Others, how many haven't woken up? 17, as of yesterday. They're alive, but it's like their minds are somewhere else. I felt sick. We have to go back to the site. Eugene, that might not be. Those kids are lying in there like vegetables because I didn't stop them from going back. If there's any chance of fixing this, it's up there. Morrison looked at the boys, then at me. All right, but we go prepared this time. An hour later, We were back at the crash site with enough equipment to outfit a small army. Morrison had called in favors and gotten us military-grade radiation detectors, electromagnetic field generators, and something he called a psychic dampening field, though he admitted he wasn't sure if it actually worked. The clearing looked different again. The burned circle had expanded, and there were new marks in the ground, symbols or patterns that hadn't been there before. They looked like writing, but not in any alphabet I'd ever seen. "It's been active," Morrison said, taking readings. "Radiation levels are twice what they were before. And these symbols, they're giving off their own electromagnetic signature." I knelt down next to one of the patterns. It was about 3 feet long, carved deep into the earth, and it seemed to pulse with a faint blue light. When I reached out to touch it, Morrison grabbed my hand. "Don't. We don't know what they do." "The boys touched them, didn't they? That's how they ended up unconscious." "Probably." But the metal scraping sound cut him off. The creature was back, materializing at the edge of the clearing. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were 3 of them, standing side by side like judges at a trial. "We return," came the voice from Morrison's radio, which was now crackling without anyone touching it. The young ones came seeking knowledge. We gave what they requested. "What did you do to them?" I demanded, standing up. "We showed them truth, your world's future, all possible paths. They see what comes if your species does not choose wisely." Morrison stepped forward, his instruments beeping frantically. "You're keeping them unconscious. Why?" they asked. "To see. Now they see all outcomes. Nuclear fire, cities of glass, silent oceans. They understand the choice that comes." "Let them go," I said. "They're just kids." They volunteered to be messengers. When they wake, they will remember. They will tell others. Perhaps others will listen. One of the other creatures stepped forward. It was taller than the first, and the glow from its sensors was brighter. "Time grows short. Your leaders prepare. New weapons. Weapons that can destroy worlds. The choice comes sooner than we hoped." "What choice?" Morrison asked. "You keep saying that, but you won't tell us what we're choosing between." The first creature pointed at the symbols on the ground. "Touch the marks. See for yourself. But no. Once you see, you cannot forget." Morrison and I looked at each other. "It could be a trap," he whispered. "Or it could be the only way to help those boys." I made the decision for both of us. I knelt down and placed my hand on the nearest symbol. The world exploded into light and sound and images that burned themselves into my brain. I saw Earth as it was now blue and green and beautiful. Then I saw it as it could be: cities floating in the sky, forests growing on other planets, humans and aliens working together among the stars. But I also saw the other path. I saw nuclear winter. I saw empty cities and poisoned oceans. I saw the Earth spinning silently through space, lifeless and alone. And through it all, I heard voices, millions of them, crying out as their worlds died. Other species that had faced the same choice we were facing. Most of them had chosen wrong. When the visions ended, I was lying on the ground with Morrison kneeling over me, checking my pulse. Eugene, can you hear me?" I sat up slowly. The creatures were still there, watching. "I saw it," I said. "All of it. The choice we have to make." "What choice?" Morrison asked urgently. I looked at the creatures, and somehow I understood. We're about to develop interstellar weapons. Within the next 10 years, the technology exists now. We just haven't put it together yet. But when we do, what? We either use it responsibly and join the cosmic community, or we use it to destroy ourselves and take half the galaxy with us. Morrison's face went white. How could weapons from Earth threaten other worlds? The tallest creature spoke again. "Your scientists play with forces they do not understand. Quantum tunneling, dimensional barriers. Soon they will create weapons that tear holes in space itself. Such weapons have destroyed entire star systems. But you can help us," I said. "You can teach us how to use the technology safely. Only if you prove you are worthy. Only if you choose peace over power." How do we prove that? The young ones will wake in 3 days. They will remember everything they have seen. What they do with that knowledge will be your test. Do they speak of war or wisdom? Do they prepare for conquest or cooperation? The creatures began to fade. We will return when the 3 days pass. If your species shows wisdom, we will help you reach the stars. If not, we will ensure the weapons are never built. Wait, Morrison called out. How will you stop us? But they were already gone. Morrison and I packed up our equipment in silence. As we walked back to the truck, I thought about what we'd learned. Humanity was about to face its final exam, and 3 unconscious teenagers held the answer key. The question was, would we be smart enough to listen to them? The boys woke up exactly 72 hours later. I was at the county hospital when it happened, sitting in the waiting room with Morrison and Mrs. Fisher. 1 minute they were lying there like empty shells. The next they were sitting up, looking around with eyes that seemed older than their years. Eddie Fisher was the first to speak. Mr. Starweather, we need to talk to you, all of us, right now. The doctors wanted to run more tests, but the boys refused. They seemed calm, focused, but there was something different about them. They moved with a kind of careful precision, like they were seeing everything for the first time. We gathered in the hospital conference room, me, Morrison, Mrs. Fisher, and the 3 boys. Morrison set his radio on the table, just in case our visitors decided to join the conversation. Tell us what you remember, I said. Neil Nunley spoke first. We saw everything, Mr. Starweather. The whole history of Earth, from the beginning until now. And we saw what comes next. He paused, looking at his hands. All the different ways it could happen. We saw other worlds too, Gene Lemon added. Hundreds of them. Most of them are dead now. The people there got smart enough to build amazing things, but not wise enough to use them right. Eddie nodded. The creatures, they're not from one world. They're like teachers. They go from planet to planet, trying to help young species make the right choice when the time comes. What choice, Mrs. Fisher asked quietly. Whether to grow up or die. Eddie said simply. We're about to learn how to build weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. The aliens want to know if we'll use them to protect people or to hurt them. Morrison leaned forward. What did they tell you to do? Tell the truth, Neil said. Tell everyone what we saw. What's coming? Let people decide for themselves. But most people won't believe you, I pointed out. Gene smiled, and for a moment he looked like the 14-year-old kid he was. Some will. And those people will tell others. And maybe, if enough people know what's at stake, we'll make the right choice. Over the next few weeks, the boys did exactly what they'd promised. They told their story to anyone who would listen. Newspapers, radio stations, even some government officials Morrison arranged for them to meet. Most people dismissed it as the overactive imagination of kids who'd been through a trauma. But some listened. Some believed. Morrison returned to Wright-Patterson with his evidence and his reports. He set up a new department, officially tasked with atmospheric phenomena research, but really focused on preparing for the choice the boys had described. Other scientists were quietly brought into the program: physicists, psychologists, diplomats, anyone who might help humanity navigate first contact. As for me, I went back to being a forest ranger. But my job had changed. I was now part of a small, secret network of people watching for signs that our visitors had returned. We monitored the skies, investigated strange sightings, and slowly built a foundation of knowledge about what was coming. The burned circle in the clearing never went away. I check on it every few months, and it's still there, a reminder that we're not alone in the universe, and that our cosmic neighbors are watching to see what kind of species we're going to become. The boys grew up, as boys do. Eddie Fisher became a physicist, working on peaceful applications of nuclear energy. Neil Nunley went into diplomacy, joining the State Department's new cultural exchange program, which was really preparation for eventual alien contact. Gene Lemon became a teacher, quietly spreading the message that humanity needed to choose wisdom over power. They never spoke, publicly, about what they'd seen after that first month. But if you knew where to look, if you understood the code words and subtle references, you could see their influence spreading. Scientists working on international cooperation instead of bigger weapons. Politicians talking about global responsibility. Ordinary people starting to think about what kind of legacy we wanted to leave for our children. It's been 3 years now since that night in the clearing. I haven't seen our visitors again, but I know they're still watching. Sometimes, late at night when I'm doing my rounds, I feel eyes on me from the darkness between the trees. Not threatening, just observing. The choice is coming. Maybe in my lifetime, maybe in my children's. But it's coming. And when it does, I hope we remember what 3 scared teenagers learned in a hospital room in West Virginia. That growing up means learning the difference between what we can do and what we should do. The universe is a big place, full of wonders we can barely imagine. But it's also dangerous, and the creatures that manage to survive in it are the ones that learn to be responsible with power. I still don't know if humanity will pass the test, but I know we have a chance thanks to some brave kids who were willing to touch alien symbols in a burned clearing and see the truth about our future. The question is, will we be wise enough to listen? Time will tell. It always does. My name is Samuel Hawthorne, and I've been a park ranger for 12 years. In all that time, I never believed in monsters. Not until I met one. I work in Pisgah National Forest, near Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina. It's beautiful country, old mountains covered in thick forests where the trees grow so close together that it feels like twilight, even at noon. My job is to study the wildlife and keep track of predators. Bears, mostly, sometimes wildcats. Normal animals that follow normal rules. I grew up here. My dad was the local vet, and I spent my childhood helping him treat injured deer and sick dogs. That's how I learned that every strange thing has a reason. Every weird behavior has a cause. When I went to college for zoology, my professors taught me the same thing. Nature might surprise you, but it always makes sense if you look hard enough. That's what I believed for 35 years. Right up until the morning Mrs. Henderson called about her cattle. "They're all dead, Sam," she said, her voice shaky on the radio. "Every last one, and there ain't a drop of blood left in them." I'd heard stories like this before. The old folks around here talk about something they call the vampire beast. They say it's been hunting these mountains since their grandparents' time, draining animals dry and disappearing like smoke. Pure nonsense, of course. There's always a logical explanation. I drove out to the Henderson farm that October morning with my usual kit camera, sample bags, measuring tape. The air was crisp and cold. With that bite that means winter's coming fast to the mountains. Clouds hung low over the peaks, making everything feel closed in and quiet. The sight that met me was unsettling. 5 cattle lay scattered across the pasture. Big, healthy animals that should have been hard to kill. But they looked like empty bags, their skins slack and wrinkled. When I knelt down to examine the first one, I couldn't find a single wound. No cuts, no bites, no signs of struggle. The grass around each animal was undisturbed, like they'd just laid down and died. "Strangest thing I ever seen," said Joe Henderson, Mrs. Henderson's husband. He was a tough old rancher who dealt with every kind of predator the mountains could throw at him. But his hands were shaking as he lit his cigarette. No blood nowhere, not a drop. I took photos and collected samples, following all the proper procedures. But something felt wrong about the whole scene. The air was too quiet, no birds singing, no insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "When did you find them?" I asked. "This morning, around sunrise. They were fine yesterday evening when I brought them in from the lower pasture." That meant whatever did this worked fast. And it had to be something big to take down 5 full-grown cattle in one night. But what kind of predator could drain blood without leaving wounds? What kind of animal could kill without disturbing the ground around its prey? I spent 3 hours at that farm, taking measurements and notes. By the time I left, I had plenty of evidence, but no answers. The samples would go to the state lab, and I'd file my report. Probably some kind of disease, I told myself. Maybe something that caused rapid blood loss. But as I drove back through the winding mountain roads, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the dark spaces between the trees. That night, I spread all my photos and notes across my kitchen table. 12 years of ranger work had taught me to be thorough. I'd seen plenty of unusual animal deaths, disease, parasites, attacks by other wildlife. This didn't match any of those patterns. The phone rang around 10 o'clock. It was Bill Crawford, who had a small farm about 5 miles from the Hendersons. "Sam, you better get over here first thing tomorrow. I got 3 dead horses, and they look just like what Joe described on the radio today." I hung up and stared at my notes. 2 farms, 8 dead animals, no wounds, no blood, no explanation that made sense. Outside my cabin, the October wind rattled the windows. The forecast called for an early winter, with ice storms possible by November. If there really was some kind of predator out there, it would be hunting hard before the weather forced it to find shelter. I made coffee and stayed up late, reading everything I could find about unusual livestock deaths. The internet had plenty of theories: disease, poisoning, attacks by escaped exotic animals, but nothing matched what I'd seen. As I finally headed to bed around midnight, I heard something that made me stop at my bedroom window. It was a sound I'd never heard before in all my years in these mountains, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch, but the sound had already faded. The forest was dead, silent, like every living thing was holding its breath. Looking back, that was the moment I should have called for backup. Should have contacted the state wildlife department or the university. Should have admitted that maybe, just maybe, there were things in these mountains that didn't follow the rules I'd learned in school. Instead, I convinced myself it was just the wind. The next morning, I drove to Bill Crawford's place with Dr. Elizabeth Moorcock from Duke University. She'd called me the night before, saying she'd heard about the livestock deaths and wanted to study them. Elizabeth was a cryptozoologist, someone who searches for animals that aren't supposed to exist. Normally, I wouldn't have much use for that kind of work, but she had real credentials and good equipment. "I've been tracking similar incidents across the southeast," she explained as we bounced along the dirt road to Crawford's farm. "Animals drained of blood with no visible wounds. It's happening, more frequently, and always in mountainous areas." Elizabeth was younger than me, maybe early 30s, with short brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She talked fast and took notes constantly, filling page after page with observations and theories. Her truck was packed with cameras, sensors, and instruments I didn't recognize. "Have you considered the possibility that we're dealing with an unknown species?" she asked. "Something that's evolved specialized feeding mechanisms?" "Every species is known eventually," I replied. "It's just a matter of proper classification." Crawford's horses were worse than Henderson's cattle. 3 beautiful animals that had been strong and healthy the day before, now lying in their pasture like deflated balloons. The smell was wrong too, not the usual scent of death, but something sharper, almost metallic. Elizabeth immediately started setting up her equipment while I did my standard examination. Same as before, no wounds, no blood, no signs of struggle. But this time, I noticed something else. "Look at this." I called Elizabeth over to where I was kneeling beside the largest horse. "See these tiny marks on the neck?" She pulled out a magnifying glass and studied the spots I'd found. They were barely visible, 2 small punctures, no bigger than pinpricks. "Fascinating," she murmured, taking photos with a macro lens. "The spacing suggests fangs, but they're too small and precise, almost like needles." "Needles don't drain blood," I said. "No, but some animals have very specialized feeding apparatus. Vampire bats, for instance, have anticoagulants in their saliva that keep blood flowing." I was about to argue that no bat could drain a horse when her electromagnetic sensor started beeping frantically. "That's odd," Elizabeth frowned at the readout. "I'm getting massive electromagnetic activity, but there's no storm system in the area." The beeping got louder and faster. Then, all at once, it stopped. "Equipment malfunction?" I suggested. Before Elizabeth could answer, Bill Crawford came running from his house. "Sam, you need to see this." We followed him to his barn, where he kept feed for his animals. The large sliding door was standing open, but that wasn't what made us stop and stare. Every bag of feed had been torn open. Not cut or chewed torn, like something with incredible strength had ripped through the heavy canvas. The grain was scattered everywhere, but in a pattern that made no sense. It formed rough circles and lines, almost like symbols. "I locked that barn tight last night," Crawford said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That door takes 2 men to move, and the latch is solid steel." Elizabeth was already photographing everything, her camera clicking rapidly. "The patterns aren't random," she said. "There's definitely intelligence behind this arrangement." I examined the torn bags more closely. Whatever had done this had claws, that much was clear from the shredded material. But the marks were wrong. Too long, too precise. And some of them seemed to change direction in ways that defied anatomy. "We need to set up surveillance," I decided. "Motion cameras, night vision, the works. If there's a predator out there, we'll catch it." Elizabeth nodded enthusiastically. "I'll coordinate with the university. We can have a full monitoring system in place by tomorrow night." As we loaded our equipment back into the trucks, I caught Elizabeth staring at the tree line. "What is it?" I asked. "Probably nothing," she said, but her voice was uncertain. I keep feeling like we're being watched." I followed her gaze to the dark line of pine trees at the edge of Crawford's property. The forest looked normal enough, thick trunks and heavy branches creating deep shadows. But as I stared, I had the strangest sensation that something was staring back. "Let's get out of here," I said. That evening, I called in favors from 3 other ranger stations and managed to borrow 6 motion-activated cameras with night vision capability. Elizabeth brought her own equipment sensors that detected electromagnetic activity, infrared cameras, and something she called a full-spectrum recorder that could pick up sounds beyond human hearing. We spent the next day setting up a grid around both farms. Cameras hidden in trees, sensors placed near the areas where animals had died, recording equipment running continuously. If anything came back, we'd catch it. Elizabeth insisted on staying overnight at my ranger station to monitor the feeds. We set up her laptop and watched the screens that showed different views of the farms. "Motion on camera 3, Elizabeth said around midnight. I leaned over to look at her screen. One of the cameras was indeed picking up movement, a large, dark shape moving between the trees near Crawford's pasture. "Can you zoom in?" She clicked a few keys, but the image just got blurrier. Whatever was moving stayed in the shadows, never quite stepping into clear view. "There," I pointed at the screen. "It's huge." The shape seemed to pause, and for just a moment I could swear I saw 2 red points of light, like eyes reflecting the camera's infrared beam. Then the feed went black. "Camera malfunction?" I asked. Elizabeth was already typing, trying to re-establish the connection. All the cameras in that sector just went offline. She pulled up her electromagnetic readings, and her face went pale. "Sam, look at this." Right before the cameras failed, I recorded electromagnetic activity unlike anything I've ever seen. The graph on her screen showed normal baseline readings, then a sudden spike that went off the charts. "Equipment malfunction," I insisted. "Has to be." But even as I said it, I knew I was wrong. Something was out there. Something big enough to take down horses, smart enough to avoid. Our cameras, and powerful enough to interfere with electronic equipment. Something that definitely wasn't in any zoology textbook I'd ever read. 3 days later, we had 7 dead cameras and no footage of anything useful. Every time the motion sensors detected movement, the cameras would fail within minutes. Elizabeth's electromagnetic readings went crazy, then everything would go silent. "It's learning," Elizabeth said as we hiked through the woods near Crawford's farm, looking for the missing cameras. "Whatever this thing is, it knows we're trying to record it." We found camera 3 hanging from a tree branch 30 feet off the ground. The housing was cracked down the middle, like something had squeezed it with incredible force. "No animal did this," I said, examining the damaged equipment. "This looks almost deliberate." Elizabeth was studying the bark of the tree. "Sam, look at these claw marks." The trunk was scored with deep gouges, too regular to be random scratches. They started at ground level and went straight up to where the camera had been hanging. But they were spaced wrong for any animal I knew, too wide for a bear, too deep for a wildcat. "Could be a hoax," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. "Someone with climbing gear and metal claws." "Then explain this." Elizabeth was pointing at something carved into the bark about 8 feet up. It was the same symbol-like pattern we'd seen in Crawford's barn circles and lines that almost looked like writing. Before I could respond, we heard screaming from the direction of the Crawford house. We ran through the woods, crashing through underbrush and jumping over fallen logs. By the time we reached the farm, Bill Crawford was standing in his yard with a shotgun, scanning the tree line. "It killed Rex," he said when he saw us. Rex was his dog, a big German shepherd that never left Crawford's side. We found Rex behind the barn. Like the other animals, he was completely drained of blood. But this was worse, somehow more personal. Rex had been a good dog, friendly and protective. Whatever killed him had done it in broad daylight, less than 50 yards from the house. "I heard him barking," Crawford said, his voice shaking. "Went to see what he was fussing about, and saw. I don't know what I saw." "Tell us," Elizabeth urged gently. "Something big, moving through the shadows like it was made of them." Rex went after it, brave as always. Crawford's hands were trembling as he reloaded his shotgun. Then the barking stopped. Found him like this 5 minutes later. I knelt beside Rex and found the same tiny puncture marks on his neck. But this time, there was something else, a smell that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just the metallic scent I'd noticed before. This was worse. Like sulfur, mixed with something rotten. "We need to call in backup," I said. "State wildlife? Maybe the university research team." "No," Elizabeth said firmly. "They'll just bring more people and more equipment. And based on what we've seen, this thing adapts to whatever we throw at it." She was right, but I didn't like where this was heading. In my 12 years as a ranger, I'd always been able to call for help when things got dangerous. Now, for the first time, I was starting to think that help might not be enough. That night, something attacked the Henderson farm. The call came in around 3 a.m. Mrs. Henderson was crying so hard I could barely understand her, but I caught enough words to know it was bad. Elizabeth and I drove through the dark mountain roads with my emergency lights flashing. We found the Hendersons huddled in their kitchen with every light in the house turned on. Joe Henderson met us at the door with a rifle in his hands. "It came right up to the house," he said. "Bold as you please, walked across the yard like it owned the place." "Did you see it clearly?" Elizabeth asked. "Clear. Enough." Joe's face was pale. "Big as a bear, but wrong. All wrong. Moved like a cat, but with arms that were too long, and the eyes." He shuddered. "Red as hot coals, and smart. Looked right at me through the window like it was deciding whether to come inside." Mrs. Henderson had been watching from the upstairs bedroom. "It killed the chickens first," she said. "All 23 of them. Didn't eat them, just drained them. Left them lying in the coop like empty skins. We checked the chicken coop with our flashlights. It was a slaughter, but a neat one. No feathers scattered, no signs of struggle. The chickens looked like they'd simply laid down and died." "Joe," I said carefully, "did you get a shot at it?" "3 shots, center mass. Should have dropped anything that walks these mountains." Joe's voice was grim. Might as well have been shooting at shadows. Thing didn't even slow down. Elizabeth was taking photographs and electromagnetic readings. Her equipment was going crazy again, just like before. "It's still close," she said, watching her sensors. "The readings are off the charts." That's when we heard it, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was the same noise I'd heard outside my cabin, but closer now, much closer. The sound started as a growl but changed pitch and tone, becoming almost like speech. Not words I could understand, but definitely some kind of communication. "It's trying to tell us something," Elizabeth whispered. The growling stopped. In the sudden silence, we could hear something moving through the trees around the house. Not walking something else, like it was flowing from shadow to shadow. "Everyone inside," I ordered, "now." We spent the rest of the night in the Hendersons' kitchen, drinking coffee and jumping at every sound. Elizabeth monitored her equipment while I kept watch out the windows. Joe sat with his rifle across his knees, and Mrs. Henderson clutched a rosary. As dawn finally broke over the mountains, Elizabeth's readings returned to normal. "It's gone," she said. "Whatever it was, it's moved on." But I knew it hadn't gone far. I could feel it out there, watching and waiting, learning about us just like we were trying to learn about it. "We need to track it," I said. "Find out where it goes during the day." Elizabeth nodded. "I've been thinking about that. Based on the electromagnetic patterns and the way it avoids detection, I think we're dealing with something that exists partially outside normal space." "That's impossible." "Is it?" Elizabeth pulled out her laptop and showed me graphs and charts. "Look at these readings. The electromagnetic signatures don't match anything in nature. and the way it can interfere with our equipment suggests abilities that go beyond normal biology. I stared at her data, trying to make sense of it with my scientific training. But the numbers didn't lie. Whatever. Was hunting these mountains operated by rules I didn't understand? Assuming you're right, I said slowly, how do we stop something like that? Elizabeth looked me straight in the eye. I don't think we can stop it, Sam. I think all we can do is try to survive it. The breakthrough came when Elizabeth found the cave. She'd been studying topographical maps, looking for places where her electromagnetic readings were strongest. The signals all pointed toward a spot high up on Grandfather Mountain, near the old Cherokee burial grounds that most locals avoided. The legends might be based on real encounters, she explained, as we hiked up the steep trail. Indigenous peoples have stories about blood drinkers that go back centuries. What if they knew something we're just now discovering? It was a hard climb. The October air was thin and cold at that altitude, and ice made the rocks treacherous. But Elizabeth's equipment was getting stronger readings with every step it took. We found the cave entrance hidden behind a curtain of dead vines. It was bigger than I'd expected, tall enough for a person to walk upright, and deep enough that our flashlights couldn't reach the back. Massive electromagnetic activity, Elizabeth said, checking her sensors. Whatever lives here, this is definitely its home. The smell hit us as soon as we stepped inside. That same sulfur and decay scent, but concentrated now. Almost overwhelming. I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from gagging. Our lights revealed walls covered in the same symbols we'd seen at the farms. But these were older, carved deep into the rock. Some looked fresh, but others had to be decades old. Maybe longer. Sam, Elizabeth's voice was barely a whisper. Look at this. She was standing beside a pile of bones. Not animal bones, these were human. Old ones, yellowed with age, but mixed in with fresher remains. I could see fragments of clothing, a few personal items. A wedding ring. A child's toy. How many people? I asked. Elizabeth was carefully documenting everything with her camera. Hard to say. At least a dozen. Maybe more. The cave went back further than we'd thought. As we followed the main passage, we found more bone piles, more carvings, and finally, in a large chamber at the very back, we found the source of the electromagnetic readings. The chamber was circular, with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. The walls were covered in symbols from floor to ceiling, thousands of them, carved by dozens of different hands over what must have been centuries. But it was the center of the room that made us both stop and stare. There was a depression in the floor, maybe 10 feet across, filled with what looked like black water. But when Elizabeth shined her light on it, the surface didn't reflect. Instead, it seemed to absorb the light, creating an area of absolute darkness that hurt to look at. Dimensional rift, Elizabeth said, her voice full of scientific excitement and terror. I've read theories about this, but never thought I'd see one. Dimensional what? A tear in space-time, a doorway to somewhere else. She was taking readings with every instrument she had. The electromagnetic activity is coming from this. It's like a wound in reality itself. As we stood there trying to understand what we were seeing, the black pool began to ripple. Not like water, more like the surface was bending and twisting. We need to leave, I said. Now. But it was too late. Something rose from the darkness, not climbing out, emerging, like it was made of the same black nothingness as the pool. At first, it was just a shape, a shadow that was somehow darker than the shadows around it. Then, it took form. The creature was huge, bigger than a bear, but built more like a cat. Its fur was black as midnight, and its eyes were indeed the burning red we'd heard described. But it was the wrongness that hit me hardest. The proportions that didn't make sense. Arms that were too long and bent in too many places. Claws that seemed to shift and change as I watched. And it was looking right at us. The thing spoke. Not in any language I recognized, but I understood it anyway. The meaning came directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. Asterisk. You have been watching me, asterisk, it said. Asterisk. Now I will watch you. Asterisk. Elizabeth's equipment was screaming alarms, lights flashing, sensors beeping frantically. The electromagnetic readings were spiking beyond anything her instruments could measure. Asterisk. I have fed on your animals, asterisk, the creature continued. Asterisk. but I hunger for more interesting prey. Asterisk, it moved toward us, not walking but flowing like liquid shadow. As it approached, I felt something I'd never experienced before, absolute primal terror. Not just fear of death, but fear of something worse. Fear of being consumed not just physically, but spiritually. The symbols, Elizabeth gasped. They're not decorations, they're warnings. She was right. Now that the creature was here, I could see what the carvings really meant. They were instructions, passed down through generations of people who had encountered this thing before. Warnings about what it was and how to survive it. Asterisk, you study me like an animal, asterisk, the creature said, its voice now carrying amusement, asterisk. But I am so much more. I am hunger itself. I am the darkness between the stars. Asterisk. It reared up on its hind legs, revealing its true size. The thing was massive, at least 8 feet tall, with arms that could easily span 12 feet. But more terrifying than its size was its intelligence. This wasn't just a predator. It was something that thought and planned and enjoyed the fear it caused. Asterisk, tell me, little watchers, asterisk, it said. Asterisk, what do you taste like when you dream? Asterisk, that's when I understood. This thing didn't just feed on blood. It fed on life force itself, on fear and pain, and the spark that makes something alive. Elizabeth grabbed my arm. The Cherokee warnings, she said urgently. They said it couldn't stand the light of truth. Scientific truth. I didn't understand what she meant until she pulled out her voice recorder and started speaking clearly and calmly. Subject appears to be an interdimensional predator, approximately 8 feet in height, utilizing electromagnetic manipulation to partially exist outside normal space-time. Feeding mechanism involves extraction of both physical blood and metaphysical life energy through specialized anatomical features. The creature recoiled slightly, as if her words had physical force. Asterisk, stop, asterisk, it commanded. But Elizabeth kept going. Entity demonstrates advanced intelligence and possible telepathic capabilities. Origin point appears to be dimensional rift, located in natural cave system, coordinates approximately. The thing lunged at us with a roar that shook the cave walls. I grabbed Elizabeth and pulled her toward the entrance, our flashlights cutting wild arcs through the darkness as we ran. Behind us, the creature's roar changed to something like laughter. Asterisk, you cannot escape what you have awakened. Asterisk, it called after us. Asterisk, I know where you sleep, I know where you hide. And soon, I will know what you taste like. Asterisk. We ran through the cave passages, stumbling over rocks and bones, until we finally burst out into the gray mountain daylight. Elizabeth was still clutching her voice recorder, and her electromagnetic sensors were slowly returning to normal readings. Did you see how it reacted when I started documenting it scientifically? She panted. It's like scientific observation actually weakens it somehow. I was looking back at the cave entrance, expecting the creature to follow us, but nothing emerged from the darkness. It can't leave during daylight, I realized. That's why all the attacks have been at night. Elizabeth nodded. We have until sunset to figure out how to stop it. As we hiked back down the mountain, I kept looking over my shoulder. The cave mouth was just a dark spot on the cliff face now, but I could feel the creature's presence like a weight on my mind. For the first time in my scientific career, I had encountered something that couldn't be explained by normal biology or physics. Something that existed in the spaces between reality and nightmare, and it was hungry. We had 4 hours until sunset. Elizabeth and I spent them in my ranger station, surrounded by every piece of research we could find about the Cherokee warnings and dimensional theory. Elizabeth had called in favors from colleagues at Duke and other universities, gathering information about interdimensional phenomena and electromagnetic disruption. The Native American legends are consistent, she said, spreading old documents across my desk. They describe a creature that feeds on life force and emerges from the dark water beneath the crease mountain. They also mention specific ways to fight it, such as scientific observation, for one. The more accurately you can describe it, the more it's forced to conform to physical laws. Elizabeth showed me passages from translated Cherokee texts. They called it speaking the creature into the world of men, but I think what they meant was forcing it to exist fully in our dimension where it can be harmed. I studied the old warnings. What else? Electromagnetic disruption. They used copper and iron arranged in specific patterns. I think they discovered that certain frequencies can destabilize its connection to the dimensional rift. We spent the next 2 hours rigging Elizabeth's equipment with copper wire and iron filings, creating what she called an electromagnetic cage around my station. If the creature came for us, we'd be ready. As the sun started to set behind the mountains, Elizabeth's sensors began picking up activity from the direction of the descent cave. "It's moving," she said, watching her instruments. "Electromagnetic signature is getting stronger." I checked my rifle for the 5th time and made sure we had fresh batteries in all our flashlights. I didn't think normal weapons would hurt the creature, but they made me feel better. The radio crackled to life. It was Bill Crawford, and he sounded terrified. "Sam, it's here again. But this time, it's not after the animals. It's walking around the house, looking in windows, making those sounds like it's talking." "Stay inside," I told him. "Keep every light on, and don't go near the windows." Elizabeth was monitoring multiple locations with her equipment. "It's not just at Crawford's place. I'm reading electromagnetic activity at the Henderson farm too. And near the town, my blood went cold. It's not hunting animals anymore." "No," Elizabeth agreed grimly. "It's coming for the people who've been watching it." The radio crackled again. This time it was Mrs. Henderson, crying hysterically. "It's in the yard. It's looking right at me through the kitchen window." Then the radio went dead. "We have to help them," I said, grabbing my gear. Elizabeth shook her head. "That's what it wants. It's drawing us out, splitting us up. Our best chance is to force a confrontation here, where we have our equipment set up." She was right, but it was hard to sit still, knowing people were in danger. The radio stayed silent, and Elizabeth's readings showed the creature moving closer to our location. At 10 o'clock, it arrived. I saw it first through the station window, a huge, dark shape moving between the trees. In the light from our flood lamps, it looked even more wrong than it had in the cave. Its proportions shifted as it moved, like it couldn't quite decide what form to take. Elizabeth's electromagnetic cage immediately started working. Lights flashed, alarms beeped, and the creature stopped about 50 feet from the building. Asterisk, clever little watchers. Asterisk, its voice came directly into our minds. Asterisk, but your metal toys cannot hold me for long. Asterisk, Elizabeth grabbed her voice recorder and started speaking in the same clear scientific tone she'd used in the cave. Subject is attempting to approach research station, but appears to be repelled by electromagnetic field generated by copper-iron grid array. Creature's form continues to exhibit dimensional instability, suggesting incomplete manifestation in normal space-time. The creature snarled and pressed against some invisible barrier. I could see its form become more solid, more real, as Elizabeth continued her clinical description. Asterisk, stop speaking. Asterisk, it commanded. Asterisk, you force me into your small world. Asterisk, entity demonstrates discomfort when subjected to scientific observation and classification. Elizabeth continued. Hypothesis. Accurate documentation forces interdimensional being to conform to physical laws of our reality. The creature was becoming more solid by the minute. What had been a shifting shadow was now clearly a massive, cat-like predator with 2 long arms and burning red eyes. "Now," Elizabeth whispered to me, "while it's locked into physical form." I raised my rifle and put 3 shots center mass. The creature roared and staggered, black blood spattering the ground. It was hurt, actually hurt, for the first time. Asterisk, impossible. Asterisk, it snarled. Asterisk, I am beyond your weapons. Asterisk, not anymore, Elizabeth said, still recording. Subject has sustained projectile damage consistent with standard ballistic trauma. Wound patterns suggest normal biological vulnerability while in fully manifested state. The creature tried to retreat, to fade back into shadow form, but Elizabeth's equipment and her constant scientific description kept it locked in our reality. I put 3 more shots into it, and this time it fell. The thing lay on the ground, breathing heavily, its red eyes fixed on us with pure hatred. Black. Blood pooled around it, and its massive form seemed to be losing coherence at the edges. Asterisk. This is not possible. Asterisk, it gasped. Asterisk, I am eternal. I am asterisk. Subject is experiencing rapid deterioration of interdimensional coherence, Elizabeth documented. Blood loss appears to be disrupting its connection to origin dimension. The creature gave one final roar of rage and pain. Then it began to dissolve, its form breaking apart like smoke in the wind. Within minutes, there was nothing left but a dark stain on the ground and the smell of sulfur. Elizabeth's electromagnetic readings dropped to normal levels. "Is it dead?" I asked. "Not dead," Elizabeth said, studying her instruments. "Banished back to its own dimension. The question is whether it can return." We spent the rest of the night monitoring the dimensional rift. Elizabeth's readings showed continued activity from the cave, but much weaker than before. The creature was still there, but wounded and unable to fully manifest in our world. Over the next few days, Elizabeth worked with a team from Duke to develop a permanent solution. They created an electromagnetic field generator powered by the local power grid and installed it at the cave entrance. As long as it stayed active, the dimensional rift would remain sealed. The livestock attacks stopped immediately. Crawford's and Henderson's farms returned to normal. The electromagnetic anomalies that had been affecting equipment throughout the area disappeared. But I know the creature is still out there, somewhere in the space between dimensions. Elizabeth's monitoring station occasionally picks up activity from the rift, attempts to break through, signals that might be communication with others of its kind. I still work as a ranger, but my job has changed. Officially, I'm part of a new atmospheric anomaly research program, funded by the National Science Foundation. Unofficially, I monitor dimensional stability throughout the Appalachian mountain range. There are other rifts out there, other places where things like the Bladenboro beast might break through. And when they do, I'll be ready with electromagnetic cages and voice recorders, and the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful weapon against the impossible is the simple act of accurately describing it. Elizabeth published our findings in several obscure scientific journals. Most of the academic community dismissed our work as elaborate fiction, but a few researchers took notice. There's a growing network of scientists quietly studying interdimensional phenomena, preparing for the day when humanity might face threats from beyond our reality. The old Cherokee warnings were right about one thing. There are some hungers that can never be fully satisfied, only contained. The creature beneath Grandfather Mountain is trapped for now, but not destroyed. And sometimes, late at night when the wind is blowing through the trees, I can feel it pressing against the barriers we've built. Watching, waiting, remembering the taste of fear. My name is Samuel Hawthorne, and I've been a park ranger for 12 years. For most of that time, I thought I understood the natural world. I thought every mystery had a scientific explanation, every phenomenon could be cataloged and classified. I was right about that last part, at least. Even interdimensional predators follow rules. You just have to be brave enough and scientific enough to figure out what those rules are. And sometimes, that's the only thing standing between civilization and the hungering dark.